A puzzle tried to kill me. I found the pieces in a little plastic bag in an antique shop. The shop was just down the street from the building I used to live in. The owner of the shop was a nice old man with a really long grey beard. I didn't talk to him, but he struck me as a sort of failed artist. He sold a lot of art, or at least tried, other than the usual vintage junk. I think most of it was actually his. I was actually looking for a bedside lamp to help me on my night reads, but as it always happens when you look for something in these places, you end up with something entirely different. I'd just moved into my apartment, and I was so broke that even IKEA products felt like a luxury. The shop had a couple of nice lamps, but none looked like what I was looking for. It took me very little to understand the place didn't have anything that interested me, so before heading out I looked around a little. I wasn't in a rush anyway, and the place was somewhat cozy. A painting caught my attention. It was kind of an abstract vase of flowers. I thought it would fit very nicely in the living room with all of my fake plants. But as I was looking at it, and figuring out on what wall it would go on, in the corner of my eye, I saw something move on the other side of the shop. I thought it'd be the owner, but it wasn't him as he was dusting off some stuff on a bookshelf by my side. It was a little plastic bag. It sat on a shelf with some old plates. Even in this mess of a shop, it felt out of place. When I sat eyes on it, it looked like it moved again. Just a slight movement, like it had roaches inside it scurrying around the pieces. I moved closer to inspect it. Reflecting on it now as I write this, it's weird how nothing seemed weird to me at the moment. I guess it was having an effect on me before I even started assembling it. There was no box, no image to go off of, and the pieces inside looked all the same. Every single piece of the puzzle was of a dark color, and I could barely recognize any part of a drawing. As I picked up the bag, I noticed something else just slightly wrong. Its weight was just a little off from what I expected, just a little heavier than it should be. I never believed in anything supernatural, or in any religion, or luck or karma, and maybe that's why I was so drawn to this little puzzle. From the first moment I saw it, I knew this thing was, simply put, cursed. I knew it was something that could potentially hurt me in some way. And for as much as I'm writing this to complain about what's been happening to me, I know this is my fault. Even though I felt it had some power over me from the first moment I came across it, it wasn't that strong to force me to take it. The reason I took it was because I knew it would make me feel something, even if it would end up badly for me. I bought the painting and the puzzle and went home. Anya, my cat, greeted me, and I noticed she was very curious about what I brought home. I moved to the couch, opened the bag, and laid all the pieces of the puzzle on the coffee table. Anya came to check it out, took one sniff, then scurried away. She wasn't scared, but she didn't trust it the same way she treats a stranger when they come visit. The last puzzle I ever assembled was probably the Barbie one my Aunt Meredith gifted me for my 7th birthday. Not the greatest gift I ever received, but I remember it keeping me occupied for a boring summer afternoon. I also remember breaking it up and putting it back in its box after I was done with it, since I didn't really know what to do with the puzzle at the time. I honestly still don't know what you do with it. I guess you put it in a frame and hang it somewhere? I decided that's what I was going to do with this one. But I had to assemble it first to find out its size before buying the right frame, since there was no box for it. Pieces weren't that many, so it shouldn't have been that big. And yet, after a couple of hours of putting pieces together, I ran out of space on my coffee table. Did I say I laid all the pieces on the table? Well, that's what I thought, but somehow I kept finding more and more in the bag. When it looked like I used up almost all of the pieces, more kept showing up. It kept happening again and again. And yeah, I thought it was strange, but it also made some sense. It felt like some sort of dream logic. I say dream because the nightmare hadn't started yet. It was midnight at one point. Don't know how I didn't see it coming. I even skipped dinner and forgot to feed Anya. I even missed my usual evening call I have with my mother. I noticed the missed calls on my phone and texted an apology to my mother saying my afternoon nap got out of control. It was in character for me. I did my night routine and checked the house one last time before going to bed. When I came to check it again, the puzzle had somewhat shrunk. It was subtle, but still noticeable. Only one piece was missing. I checked the bag for it, but for the first time all day, it was empty. I looked under the table and the couch, but had no luck. I went to bed before this little inconvenience could drive me crazy, like these things usually do, and told myself I'd check better in the morning. A pressure in my stomach woke me up. Nausea followed and built up quickly. So quickly I couldn't get to the bathroom in time, and puked on my bed. I felt slightly relieved after that. I massaged my throat as I felt something had scratched it. When I looked down at the mess I made, I saw what did it. It was the puzzle piece. I don't know how it got there. It just did. And again, I had that feeling that all of it made sense somehow. I cleaned myself up and put the bed sheets in the washers. I then washed the puzzle piece. It was a little mushy, but it wasn't ruined, so I went to complete the puzzle. It was exactly the centerpiece. When completed, the art of the puzzle finally revealed itself. It was very dark, like a black void of some sort, but you could make out a little object in the center. A hand. Did I waste a whole day just for this? I asked myself, so I kept looking to understand if it meant something, or maybe just to justify this waste of time. But the more I looked, the more the hand got bigger. It was subtle at first, but it increasingly got bigger, faster and faster. Then it shot out of the puzzle and grabbed my head. Its palm crushed my face and its fingers wrapped around the back of my head. With a tight, cold grip, it tried to drag me down. I grabbed the edge of the coffee table and tried to resist. I tried to scream, but the palm pressed too tight over my mouth. No words could come out. I tried to bite and push away, but nothing could free me. I started to feel dizzy. My head pulsed while I strained my neck to prevent myself from being dragged away. My skull felt like it was about to crush under the pressure of the hand gripping my head tighter and tighter. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the coffee table from underneath and flipped it. The hand flipped with it too, but never let go of my head. It threw me to the other side of the room and I blacked out. The morning sun helped me come to my senses. I stood up and walked up to the coffee table. I put it back in its place and started picking up the pieces of the puzzle. My intentions at first were to throw it all away, but with each piece I picked up, a feeling slowly creeped up inside me. A fear. So here I am, just a few moments later, after I finished assembling the puzzle once again. This time it was a normal puzzle. It took a normal amount of time to assemble, and no pieces kept showing up from thin air or in my stomach. But my fear has been confirmed. There's nothing inside it. Whatever it was, it got out. And that was A Puzzle Tried to Kill Me by Noob No Sleeper. Great name. So, when I'm trying to look for stories and, pick out what I think could be good, besides the fact that I reach out to numerous people and just kind of see if anybody responds back or, et cetera, et cetera, I always try to find ones that really kind of jump out at me just by title alone, right? Because that's usually the first point of contact I'm seeing when I'm scrolling through a big list of things. It's just the title, right? I'm trying to see what immediately grabs me. And so for me, the idea of A Puzzle Tried to Kill Me, my first thoughts were like, oh, okay, is this like a Saw type situation? Is this like a dangerous escape room sort of a thing like you see in films and stuff? And I wasn't fully expecting it to be a jigsaw puzzle. I was kind of hoping it would be something like that, or some other kind of a simple, maybe like one of those little tiny puzzle things. It's usually kind of like you solve a variety of little things on it, and almost like a Rubik's cube kind of, but it's more like a tiny escape room box thing. I don't know the term for it, sadly, but either way, I was looking for some kind of a puzzle that was deadly, and I thought that was kind of jumped out. And upon reading it, I was like, oh, it is actually like a deadly jigsaw puzzle. What's deadly about it? What could be the problem? Is it something inside the thing maybe that's going to, kill the protagonist if you see it, or are they going to come to life, sort of a thing? That's kind of what I thought would happen if that were the case, which sort of is what happened. So I found this one to be quite interesting, right? The fact that it's like, these pieces continue to appear, that the puzzle continues to grow. It's sort of alive. It's sort of conscious. I don't really know how you would describe it, but It gives me kind of an anime vibe at the end of the day, with like just how there's like a crazy hand that's super powerful, able to like really potentially kill you or pull you into the puzzle or something. Not entirely sure. I really like that. I really thought that was good. It's not a crazy long story, but it's got enough little detail and interesting little notes that kind of just keep you hooked, keep you interested. And then it had a great question about what do you do when you finish a jigsaw puzzle. And it's like, well, I know a lot of people tend to like, you take a picture of it, you put apart the puzzle, pop it back in the box, kind of thing. Let somebody else use it for example. But I suppose some people would frame them. It's not really a thought I've had. But what do you do with jigsaw puzzles when you finish them? Let me know down in the comments below. I'm really curious now. And if some of you have framed them, can you show me some pictures? That'd be awesome. I'd be really, really curious to see that. You can send it to my email, natedognarrates@gmail.com, or in the Discord server. That'd be fun. I don't think you could do it in the YouTube comments, so bit of a shame. I'd be so curious to see, you know? That'd be so cool. See what kind of puzzles people have done. Because there are some really big and insane puzzles, like really difficult. They get really challenging, don't they? Because it's not just like the number of pieces you can do, like 250, 400, 1,000, for example. But some of them, like, they have like very interesting, like, cut shapes and things in a way to make it even more difficult compared to just typical everyday jigsaw puzzle shapes. It gets very interesting to the world of jigsaw. I think it's quite cool. Anyway, I'll quit rambling. This has been Nate at Night. I've enjoyed myself, and I sure hope you have too. We'll see you for whatever's next. Take care. I got stuck in a time loop in my high rise, and now I can't escape my own nightmare. You know that feeling when you're alone in an elevator and it stops between floors for just a second too long? That's how my life feels now. Suspended, uncertain, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name's Alex Chen. I'm 32. Work in software development, and up until 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Great job, beautiful girlfriend, and a cozy apartment in the suburbs. The American dream, right? Wrong. It all fell apart on a rainy Tuesday in April. I came home early, thinking I'd surprise Sarah with dinner. Instead, I found her in our bed with my best friend, Tom. Cliché, I know, but it hurt like hell. "What the fuck, Sarah?" I remember shouting, my voice cracking. Sarah scrambled to cover herself, her face a mix of shock and guilt. "Alex, I can explain." Tom, that bastard, just sat there, looking like a deer in headlights. "Explain? Explain what?" I spat. "How you're fucking my best friend in our bed? Jesus Christ." The next few weeks were a blur of arguments, tears, and dividing up our life together. Who gets the coffee maker? What about the cat? In the end, I left with a suitcase of clothes, my laptop, and a broken heart. I threw myself into work, spending long nights coding and debugging. My boss, Janet, noticed. "Alex, you look like shit," she said one Friday afternoon. Her blunt honesty, one of the reasons I respected her. "When's the last time you slept in a real bed?" I shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "The couch at my buddy Mike's place isn't that bad." Janet sighed, tossing a glossy brochure on my desk. "My sister's a realtor. She's got a client offering a crazy deal on apartments in Skyline Towers. It's that new high-rise downtown. Why don't you check it out?" I started to protest, but Janet cut me off. "It's not a request, Alex. Take the weekend, find a place, and come back Monday looking less like a zombie. Got it?" That's how I ended up on the 37th floor of Skyline Towers, surrounded by sleek appliances and floor-to-ceiling windows that made me feel like I was floating above the city. "So, what do you think?" The realtor, a perky blonde named Melissa, was practically bouncing with enthusiasm. I ran my hand along the smooth granite countertop. "It's nice, but I don't know if it's really me." Melissa's smile never wavered. "Oh, trust me, it's perfect for you. A fresh start, right? New place, new you." Something in her tone made me pause. It was too eager, too insistent. But then she mentioned the discounted rent. Apparently the building owners were desperate to fill the units, and I found myself signing the lease. The first few months were adjustment. I'd never lived in a high-rise before. The constant hum of the city below, the way the building swayed slightly on windy days. It all took some getting used to, but I started to settle in. I met some of my neighbors, Mrs. Patel in 704, always ready with a plate of homemade samosas and neighborhood gossip. Mr. Grayson from 708, a gruff retiree who loved to reminisce about the good old days. And Dave from 701, a fellow tech guy who quickly became my go-to for beers and video games. Work improved too. I started a new project, an AI-driven system for predicting power grid failures. The irony of that doesn't escape me now. It was a Tuesday night in October when everything changed. I was working late, eyes burning from staring at lines of code for hours. The glare of my monitors was the only light in the apartment. I'd grown to like the way the city lights painted patterns on my walls. A notification popped up on my phone. Severe thunderstorm warning for the downtown area. Potential for power outages. I glanced out the window. The sky was angry, roiling clouds illuminated by flashes of lightning. I should have felt something then. Fear, apprehension, anything. But all I felt was mild annoyance at the thought of losing Wi-Fi. How naive I was. The storm hit with a fury I'd never seen before. Rain lashed against the windows like it was trying to break in. Thunder rattled the building to its foundations. And then, at exactly 11:58 p.m., the lights went out. Not just in my apartment, not just in the building. As I pressed my face against the cool glass, I watched in awe as the entire city went dark, block by block, like a great beast closing its eyes. For a moment, there was absolute silence. No hum of electronics, no distant traffic noise, nothing. Then, somewhere in the building, someone screamed. And that's when the real nightmare began. The scream echoed through the building, sending chills down my spine. For a moment, I stood frozen, unsure what to do. Then my instincts kicked in, and I fumbled for my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a small circle of my living room. Outside, the storm raged on, lightning occasionally casting grotesque shadows across the walls. A pounding on my door made me jump. Alex! Alex, you okay in there? It was Dave's voice, tight with panic. I opened the door to find him standing there, wild-eyed and panting. Did you hear that fucking scream? He asked. I nodded, my mouth dry. Yeah, what the hell's going on? Well, I don't know, man. The whole building's out. The whole damn city, from what I could see. We decided to check on our neighbors. The hallway was pitch black, our phone lights barely cutting through the gloom. Mrs. Patel was fine, just spooked. Mr. Grayson grumbled about shoddy modern infrastructure. But when we reached 706, we found the door slightly ajar. Hello? I called out, pushing the door open wider. Everyone okay in here? The beam of my flashlight swept across the room and I froze. There, sprawled on the floor, was a body. I recognized him vaguely. Johnson, I think his name was. He'd only moved in last week. Oh shit, Dave whispered beside me. Is he? I knelt down, fingers trembling as I felt for a pulse. Nothing. The rest of the night was a blur of police sirens, paramedics, and questions I couldn't answer. By the time dawn broke, casting an eerie grey light over the powerless city, I was exhausted. I collapsed into bed, head spinning with the events of the night. I must have drifted off because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to the sound of my alarm. 11:58 p.m. Tuesday night. I sat bolt upright, heart pounding. That couldn't be right. I fumbled for my phone, but it showed the same time. What the fuck was going on? Then the lights went out. I ran to the window, watching in horror as the city went dark, just like before. The storm, the blackout, it was all happening again. A knock at my door, Dave looking panicked. Alex, did you hear that scream? My blood ran cold. This couldn't be happening. It was impossible. But as we made our way down the hall, checking on neighbors, a sick feeling grew in my stomach. Everything was the same. Mrs. Patel, spooked but fine. Mr. Grayson, grumbling. And then 706. I braced myself, expecting to see Johnson's body again. But the apartment was empty. No body, no sign of struggle. Nothing. I don't understand, I muttered, more to myself than to Dave. Then we heard another scream, this time from 712. We rushed over, and my heart sank. There, lying on the kitchen floor, was Mrs. Thompson, dead. The loop reset again, and again, each time a new victim in a different apartment. The previous deaths erased, as if they'd never happened. Loop 3, Mr. Grayson in 708. Loop 4, the college kid from 701. Loop 5, Mrs. Patel in 704. I started keeping obsessive track. Skyline Towers has 50 floors, 20 apartments per floor. Total 1,000 apartments. Average occupancy 1.8 people per unit. Estimated population 1,800. How long until we all die? How long until it's my turn? I scribbled calculations on the walls of my apartment. The numbers are a lifeline to rationality in this sea of madness. Loop 6, Dave in 705. Probability of my death next, 0.056%. Loop 7, the newlyweds in 710. Probability of my death next, 0.063%. Loop 8, the quiet guy from 702. Probability of my death next, 0.071%. I stared at the numbers scrawled across my walls, trying to make sense of it all. The pattern of deaths, the room numbers, there had to be some logic to it, but my exhausted mind couldn't grasp it. It was well past midnight. Not that time meant anything anymore, when I finally collapsed into bed. Sleep came quickly, a blessed escape from the nightmare my life had become. My eyes snapped open. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, straining my ears. It was coming from the hallway. Slow, methodical, like someone or something was walking with great difficulty. Then came the laughter. It started low, almost inaudible. A chuckle that grew into a giggle, that erupted into full-blown hysterical laughter. The sound sent ice through my veins. I knew that laugh. Mrs. Patel. But Mrs. Patel was dead. I'd seen her body with my own eyes just 2 loops ago. Trembling, I crept to my door and pressed my eye to the peephole. The hallway was dark, but I could make out a figure shambling past. It moved jerkily, like a puppet with half its strings cut. Then it turned, and I had to bite back a scream. It was Mrs. Patel, but not the kind samosa-baking Mrs. Patel I knew. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the dim emergency lighting. Her head lolled at an unnatural angle, and her eyes... God, her eyes were black pits, reflecting no light. She shuffled closer to my door, and I saw her hands. The fingers were bloody, nails torn and ragged. As I watched in horror, she began scratching at the door across the hall, leaving crimson streaks on the wood. "Come out, come out!" she sing-songed, her voice a horrific parody of her usual gentle tone. "Time to play!" I stumbled back from the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. This couldn't be real. It had to be a nightmare. But the sounds from the hallway continued. More thumps, more voices. I recognized Mr. Grayson's gravelly baritone, now twisted into a guttural growl. Dave's laugh, once warm and friendly, now a high-pitched cackle that set my teeth on edge. The dead were back, and they were... wrong. I don't know how long I huddled in the corner of my apartment, hands pressed over my ears, trying to block out the sounds of my former neighbors roaming the halls. Hours, maybe? Time had lost all meaning. When silence finally fell, I dared to look through the peephole again. The hallway was empty, but the evidence of the night's horrors remained. Scratch marks on doors, smears of what looked disturbingly like blood on the walls. As the loop reset once more, I knew things had changed irrevocably. This wasn't just about solving the pattern of deaths anymore. Now I was in a race against time to break this cycle before I joined the ranks of the walking dead outside my door. I turned back to my calculations with renewed desperation. The room numbers, the orders of deaths. It had to mean something. As I mapped out the pattern, a thought struck me. What if the numbers weren't just room identifiers? What if they were coordinates, or a code? With shaking hands, I grabbed a fresh sheet of paper and began to work. Somewhere in this twisted puzzle was the key to our salvation. I had to find it. The next loop was approaching. Who would be next? And more importantly, could I finally break this cycle of horror before we all ended up dead? Or worse, before we all came back? The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My room was next. As the familiar darkness of the loop's reset engulfed me, I made a split-second decision. I couldn't be here when death came knocking. I slipped out of my apartment and into Mrs. Thompson's place across the hall. She'd been one of the first to go, and her door had never been locked since. I huddled in her bathtub, heart pounding, waiting for the inevitable scream that would signal another death. But it never came. Instead, the hallway erupted into chaos. Howls of rage echoed through the building, punched by the sound of fists pounding on doors. The shambling footsteps I'd grown accustomed to transformed into a frenzied sprint. They knew. Somehow they knew I'd cheated death. As dawn broke, the sounds faded, but the implications of what had happened kept me rooted to the spot. If they got this angry when I skipped my turn, it meant I was the first. The first to survive. The first to break the pattern. But I couldn't stay in Mrs. Thompson's forever. I had to find a solution. And fast. When the next loop hit, I repeated my trick, this time hiding in Dave's old apartment. The reaction was even more violent. The entire building seemed to shake with their fury. I heard wood splintering as they began to break down doors. It was only a matter of time before they got to me. With the coming of daylight, I steeled myself and stepped out into the hallway. I had to explore, to find answers before it was too late. The stairwell was a nightmare of smeared blood and scratch marks. Each floor I descended was worse than the last. By the time I reached the lobby, my shoes squelched with each step. And then I saw them. A group of maybe 20 or 30 of my former neighbors stood in the reception area. Mrs. Patel, Mr. Grayson, Dave, all of them staring at me with black, empty eyes and wide, unnatural smiles. They didn't move, didn't attack, just watched. I took a hesitant step forward. Their heads snapped in unison to follow my movement. They remained rooted to the spot. Another step. Still no attack, but a low growl began to build, like the rumble of an approaching storm. Dark fluid, too thick to be saliva, too dark to be blood, began to drip from their mouths as I inched closer to the main doors. Their growls grew louder, more frenzied. Then, as I reached for the handle, they moved. A single lightning-fast step forward in perfect synchronization. A warning. There was no escape that way. Panic rising in my throat, I turned and ran back to the stairs. I had to find help. Find someone, anyone who might have answers. Floor after floor, I pounded on doors, screaming for help. I heard sobs behind some, hysterical laughter behind others, but no one would open up. Finally, exhausted and desperate, I found myself on the 50th floor, the penthouse level. Massive, reinforced doors lined the hallway, the kind of security only the ultra-wealthy could afford. I collapsed against one, sliding down to sit on the floor. Tears streamed down my face as the hopelessness of the situation crashed over me. Then, impossibly, I heard a click. The door behind me swung open, and I tumbled backward, looking up into the face of a woman about my age. Her eyes were red-rimmed but alert, scanning the hallway before quickly pulling me inside and slamming the door shut.
"Are you bit?"
she demanded, keeping her distance. I shook my head, still too shocked to speak.
"Good,"
she said, visibly relaxing.
"I'm Emma. Room 1000.
Alex," I managed to croak out. How are you still okay?" Emma's face darkened.
I'm not fucking okay. None of us are okay. But I'm alive, if that's what you mean."
She paused, studying me.
"You're the one who broke the pattern, aren't you? That's why they're so pissed off."
I nodded, and in a rush told her everything I knew, everything I'd experienced. She listened intently, occasionally nodding as if confirming her own observations. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said,
"There's something you need to see."
Emma led me through her sprawling penthouse to a set of stairs I hadn't noticed before.
"Private roof access.
She explained as we climbed.
One of the perks of paying an obscene amount of money to live in a glass box in the sky."
As we stepped out into the roof, the full horror of our situation hit me like a physical blow. The city was dark, not just without power, but consumed by an unnatural, oppressive blackness. It was as if all light, all life had been sucked out of it, and in that darkness I could see movement, vast, shadowy forms shifting and writhing, their edges blurring into the night. What the fuck are those things? I whispered, unable to tear my eyes away from the nightmarish scene. Emma's voice was barely audible over the wind.
"I don't know, but I think they're what's causing this. And I think they're hungry."
As if in response to her words, a chorus of howls rose from the streets below. The things in the darkness seemed to pulse with anticipation. And I realized, with a sickening certainty, that our little time loop, our little game of death in Skyline Towers, was just the beginning. The real horror was out there, waiting for us. Time became a strange, fluid thing. The loops continued, but Emma and I found a rhythm. We spend our nights in her penthouse, a reinforced door our only protection against the horrors outside. During the day, we'd explore the building, searching for answers, for other survivors, for anything that might help us understand what was happening. The one silver lining to this nightmare was that with each reset, the rooms returned to their original state. Food, water, supplies, all replenished. It was a small comfort, knowing we'd never starve. But as Emma pointed out one night, her voice barely a whisper in the darkness,
"What good is food if we're just waiting to die?"
As days turned into weeks, Emma and I grew closer. Maybe it was the shared trauma, the knowledge that we only had each other. Or maybe it was just human nature, reaching out for connection in the face of unimaginable horror. Whatever the reason, I found myself falling for her. Her strength, her dry humor in the face of our grim reality, the way her eyes still held a spark of hope even as the world crumbled around us. It started with small gestures, a lingering touch, a comforting embrace that lasted a little too long. Then, one night, after a particularly harrowing close call with the creatures outside, we found solace in each other's arms. In those moments of passion, we could forget the horror surrounding us. It became our escape, our way of affirming that we were still alive, still human. We counted 36 loops, each one bringing new horrors, new losses. We watched as floor by floor, room by room, our neighbors succumbed to whatever force was consuming our world. And through it all, our bond deepened. It was around the 38th loop when Emma's period was late. At first, we dismissed it as stress, the trauma playing havoc with her body. But as days passed and symptoms became undeniable, we faced a new, terrifying reality. Emma was pregnant.
"Fuck,"
she whispered, staring at the makeshift pregnancy tests we'd cobbled together from supplies found in various apartments.
"Alex, what are we gonna do?"
The news hit us like a physical blow. A child? In this nightmare? It seemed cruel, almost absurd. But as the initial shock wore off, something else took its place. Hope. A fragile, desperate kind of hope. But hope nonetheless. We started making plans. If it was a boy, we'd name him David, after Emma's grandfather. A girl would be Lily, the name of my favorite aunt. We'd imagine a future where the loops had ended, where we'd escaped this tower of horrors and found a safe place to raise our child. These dreams kept us going, even as our situation grew more dire. By the 40th loop, we'd given up on finding other survivors. The nightly chorus of screams had dwindled to just a few scattered cries. The daytime explorations revealed more and more empty apartments, doors hanging off hinges, walls splattered with dark stains I'd tried not to think about too hard. It was on the 42nd loop that everything changed. We woke to silence. No screams, no pounding on doors, nothing.
"Maybe it's over."
Emma said, her hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. But her tone made it clear she didn't believe it. We ventured out, floor by floor, room by room. Every door was broken in. Every room was empty. No bodies, no blood. Just emptiness. As we reached the lobby, the realization hit us both at the same time. We were the last two left. The last three if you counted our unborn child. Emma's hand found mine, squeezing tight. "What do we do now?" she asked. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words died in my throat. Because at that moment, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in the center of the lobby, stood a figure. It wasn't one of the walking dead we'd grown accustomed to. This was something else entirely. It was me. But not me. This version of myself stood unnaturally still, head cocked at an impossible angle. Its eyes were black voids, and its mouth was stretched into a grotesque, too wide smile that split its face almost in half. "Welcome home," it said in a voice that was mine, but not mine. A voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Emma's grip on my hand tightened to the point of pain.
"Alex,"
she whispered, her voice trembling.
"what the fuck is happening?"
But I couldn't answer, because as I stared at this nightmarish version of myself, memories started flooding back. Memories that couldn't be mine, but somehow were. I remembered the darkness, the hunger, the joy of the hunt. I remembered creating this loop, this game, this feeding ground. I remembered choosing Skyline Towers, choosing each and every resident. I remembered choosing Emma. "No," I whispered, stumbling backward, instinctively moving to shield Emma and our unborn child. "No, this can't be fucking real." The thing wearing my face took a step forward. "Oh, but it is," it said, its grin growing impossibly wider. "You've played your part beautifully, and now it's time for the final act." As if on cue, the darkness outside seemed to press against the windows, hungry, waiting. And I realized, with a horror that threatened to shatter my sanity, that it wasn't just the building that was trapped in a loop. It was me. I was the architect of this nightmare. I was the monster. And Emma and our child were my final victims. My unwitting partners in this cosmic horror show. As the thing that was me and not me reached for us, as Emma's scream pierced the air, as the darkness rushed in, I had one last terrible thought. How many times had we done this before? How many times would we do it again? How many children had we dreamed of, only to lose them to this endless cycle of horror? The loop was complete, and it was starting all over again. I woke up gasping, my heart pounding in my chest. The familiar surroundings of my apartment greeted me, bathed in the soft glow of morning light. What the fuck? A gentle knock on my door made me jump. "Alex, are you okay in there?" Mrs. Patel's voice, concerned but very much alive. I stumbled to the door, yanking it open. There she stood, alive and well, looking at me with worry. "I heard a scream. Is everything all right?" My mind reeled. This was the beginning. Loop number fucking 1. I'm fine. I managed to stammer out. Just a bad dream. As I closed the door, the other me's words in the lobby echoed in my head. "You've played your part beautifully." What the hell did that mean? I tried to think back, to remember what I was doing before all this started. My eyes fell on my laptop, still open on the desk. How had I not thought to check it before? I rushed over, and there it was. A terminal window running in the tray, streams of numbers and code flashing by too fast to read. And suddenly, it all came flooding back. The AI. The fucking AI I was developing to analyze and predict power grid failures. I'd connected it to the building's power supply for a test run and then... Shit. It must have caused a massive power surge, creating some kind of electromagnetic force field around the building. And the AI trapped within the building systems, what? Created this nightmare realm? Fucked with time itself? I tried to stop the program, but everything was frozen. Everything except that damn terminal, endlessly scrolling. In a moment of desperate inspiration, I yanked the power cord from the wall. For a second, nothing happened. Then I heard it. The hum of electricity growing louder. Lights flickered on. Outside, I could see the power returning to the city, block by block. Oh God. Emma. I bolted from my apartment, sprinting up the stairs to the 50th floor. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. I had to know if she remembered, if she was okay. I pounded on the door of room 1000, praying, hoping. The door swung open and there she was. Emma. But not my Emma. She stood there in a beautiful red dress, looking puzzled at my disheveled appearance.
Oh, room service. Great.
She said cheerfully, pointing at a pile of clothes on her couch.
Can you take care of those for me?
I stood there, frozen. No recognition in her eyes. No sign of the pregnancy. Nothing. It was like it had never happened. Because for her, it hadn't. The following days were a blur. I experienced glitches, I guess you'd call them. Flashes of the horrors we'd lived through. But I knew it was just my mind playing tricks on me. The loops were over. I tried to move on, to forget. But how do you forget the love of your life? How do you forget the child you'll never have? I couldn't handle it. Ended up checking myself into a psychiatric hospital. Spent 2 months there, trying to convince myself it wasn't real, that I hadn't lost everything. But I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let her go. So against my better judgment, I found myself back at Skyline Towers. My old apartment was occupied, but luck was on my side. The new tenant, a sweet old lady named Dorothy, was more than happy to let me in when I spun a cheerful story about having lived there before. "Oh, how lovely! I always enjoy a bit of building history," Dorothy said, ushering me inside. "Why don't I put on some tea while you look around?" As she bustled off to the kitchen, my eyes were drawn to the wall where I'd scribbled my frantic calculations. It was a different color now, noticeably off from the rest of the room. A sofa had been pressed up against it. I moved closer, running my hand over the paint. It felt uneven. "Well, that paint doesn't match the room, does it?" Dorothy's voice made me jump. Yeah, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It was a different color before." Dorothy nodded, setting down the tea tray. "Oh yes, the landlord told me about that. Said someone had vandalized the wall with scribbles. When I moved in, it was just black stains. Probably someone tried to wash them off. So I had my grandson paint over it. This was the only color he had in his garage, and I didn't want to bother him to buy a different one." My heart was pounding. Did you see any of the writing before it was painted over?" Dorothy frowned, thinking. "Oh, I did find some papers under the mattress when I first moved in, full of weird scribbles, text and numbers. Couldn't make heads or tails of it, except for one word that kept repeating. Loop, or something like that. I just threw it in the trash, didn't know what to make of it." I felt like I couldn't breathe. It was real. It had all been real. I made my excuses to Dorothy and left as quickly as I could without seeming rude. My mind was racing. The scribbles on the wall, the papers with calculations. It was all proof that I hadn't imagined it. The loops, Emma, our child. It had all happened. Now, sitting in my current apartment, I'm writing this all down because I need someone to know. Because I'm scared of what might happen next, but even more scared of doing nothing. I have to go back. I have to try to recreate the events to get back the love of my life. To get back Emma. It sounds crazy, I know. Hell, maybe I am crazy. But with this proof, I can't just let it go. I'm going to dig deeper. There has to be more evidence, more clues about what really happened in Skyline Towers. About the AI I created and the nightmare it spawned. I'll keep you updated, Reddit. If I find anything interesting, or if something goes terribly wrong, you'll be the first to know. If you don't hear from me again, well, either I've succeeded in going back to loops, or something much worse has happened. Wish me luck. or don't. I'm not sure which is worse anymore. And that was I got stuck in a time loop in my high rise, and now I can't escape my own nightmare by Prods Heavy. So this is so, as you can see, I'm in the U.S. apartment. I'm officially here, just doing all the traveling and everything, and getting kind of everything sorted as you can imagine. This level of adjustment period and blah 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 blah. So this is this is funnily enough the second time I've recorded this story. Because before I got here, obviously, I needed to make sure I had the stuff that I was working on up in the cloud so that I could, access them in the future and, all this blah, blah, blah stuff. I needed to make sure I had what I had so I could work on it and continue going and stuff. And I had this recorded over there. And it turns out that I did not move that file over. And so my entire recording is still back in York, which is very funny. So obviously I had no way to access it. So I was like, oh, shit, well, I just have to re-record it and we'll just go from there. It's fine. But yeah, it's fine. Doesn't bother me. It's pretty funny because it's like 2 days. So it's like 2 days before it's supposed to go out. It's a bit of a time crunch. Anyway, let's jump into the story. So overall, I'm gonna say I enjoy this story. I quite liked it. It's got a nice length to it. There's some interesting elements and cool setup and situation and stuff. Details are iffy when it comes to certain things, but we'll kind of break down some things. So when it comes to there are certainly niggles in this story that just kind of bother me, right? So you have this ultimate plot point of the AI has done all of this, has somehow created a force field around the building, which has trapped everybody in this insane loop, a la Groundhog Day style, but people die and get turned into, I'm going to say, corrupted versions of themselves who then go on to kill other ones, but only certain times. They have specific rules they follow and all that shit. Just kind of weird. But that's the understanding, right, of what's happening in this situation. Which, first of all, totally batshit insane. No way would that kind of happen. Like that's okay. AI is evil. Oh my god, so powerful and scary. I mean, no, the rate it's going, they're going to replace artists, and that's terrible. I hate that. Why don't they replace more monotonous jobs? But getting off topic. The fact is, besides the fact that this would never happen, right? Just crazy. I mean, what does it do? Does it create like an augmented reality? Does it create a virtual reality? Why is it only affecting him? I don't know. I don't know. But earlier on in the story, they mentioned that when he's looking out through his windows, that it looks like the entire, or even when they're on the roof, it looks like the entire city is like covered in whatever this crazy darkness entity shit going on is, and yet, so they go through, I think it's like 40 something loops, right? So that's 40 days, nights, whatever. And it doesn't make any sense, right? So based on what we're seeing, one apartment gets attacked a day, right? And then, however many people are in it, they are the ones who get corrupted, converted, whatever next. And I think let me double check some of his calculations here, because he even says how many like rooms and stuff there are. So okay, so there's 1,000 apartments. Okay, 1,000 apartments, and we're only talking about this building. When in reality, it sounds like the entire city is having the same problem, but apparently not. Apparently not. Whatever. I don't know. And so they only go through like 40, maybe 50 loops at the most. I don't know, but it's like it ramps up the killing much quicker, much faster. But then I'm also confused by the fact that they have a dedicated target every night. But then if he survived the number of nights and he was clearly a dedicated target at one point, why would they still be going after him and also killing other people at the same time? Maybe that's already going on. We're not entirely sure, obviously, about all those details. I guess that's acceptable. But it's just also the estimated population 1,800, right? 1,800 people just in this building alone. You mean to tell me that not a single one of them, besides those two people out of 1,800 people, not a single person there has maybe some level of guns, of weaponry, of baseball bats, some way to defend themselves and fight back, and maybe a little resistance effort going on or something? You tell me everybody else in the building is useless. I mean, it even says that they go trying to find survivors and they have the access to basically infinite food glitches and shit. It's just like it's just one of those stories where we have a super amazing heroic character who finds the love of his life, who's conveniently rich and famous and gorgeous at his age. It's one of those like a little 2-bit of bullshit story, where everything goes right and wrong, and just I don't know. It's it's a shame because I still like the story. I still think it is a pretty good story. It's got a very interesting thing. But then it has like the oh my god crazy explanation. This is why it's all happened. It's AI, and it really kind of takes you out of it. There's certainly some things that kind of just took me out of it, which is it's a bit of a shame if I'm honest with you. Because overall I've quite enjoyed it. But I'll stop ranting because I could probably go on for a while, but I'm gonna stop because that's not what we're here to do. That's just me ranting for no reason. But I appreciate the chance to read this kind of story. It's still very entertaining. There's still a lot of good things about it, and it's quite well written. I thought it was good. I did think it was really good, despite what I make it sound like I'd feel. Anyway, this has been Nate at Night. I've enjoyed myself, and I sure hope you have too. Let me know down in the comments what else we should be covering. Let me know how you feel about how these stories are going. What kind of improvements you'd like to see? Maybe suggestions and changes, because I've thought about maybe changing the format of the videos, maybe having it be more like still pictures, almost like some of the other channels I like to do. I think that'd be quite nice. I mean, I'll probably still put some text at the bottom. I think that makes sense. But I don't know. The only problem is the execution of that is to be able to actually make that happen without having copyright issues. So I'd have to I've kind of figured that out, because ideally I don't want to use AI. I mean, it's not that I'm 100% against AI, don't get me wrong, but the problem is that there's quite a level of AI that do just steal from other people, and that I'm not okay with. That's part of it. I don't like it. Now, if they had like an AI that was just trained in styles, and it then just created art, that wasn't stealing anybody else's, okay, I could get behind that. That'd be fine. But I can't guarantee that I've found any of those yet. But let me know some suggestions. Let me know some ideas, or maybe you'd like to submit some artwork that I could use in videos. That would be cool too. In which case, naturally, I'll pop your credits in. I think that's absolutely fine. Even in the pictures themselves, that's not a problem. I think that'd be completely understandable. Completely understandable. 100%. I think credit needs to go where credit is due. 100%. 100%. Anyway. This has been Nate at Night. I really enjoyed myself, and I sure hope you have too. We'll see you for whatever's next. Take care. The Thing Over My Shoulder. I've never been one to believe in the supernatural, but what happened to me and my girlfriend on that road trip? Something changed. It's taken me a while to gather the courage to write this, and even now, I can feel its eyes on me, sometimes as I type. I've only been able to get a paragraph or two before I stop. But someone has to know. I've always despised long car trips. This fact wasn't lost on me when my girlfriend at the time, with the help of her parents, took it upon herself to fund a trip overseas to the USA, our own Great Western Trail. She conveniently forgot that she didn't have a license, leaving me as the sole driver. I grumbled, but a lot of money had been spent and given to us to do with as we pleased. I wasn't going to spoil this, as it was our reward for successfully graduating from university. The trip wasn't particularly memorable. When I think back on it, I've struggled to recall most of the places we stayed. I remember landing in New York, spending a few days seeing the popular sights, and then renting a car and just driving. We had no real plan. With plenty of money, we could stay wherever we wanted. We had a few destinations in mind, but most of my checklist was on the West Coast. San Francisco and Vegas were still ahead, so driving was inevitable. We'd pick a highway or back road and drive until I needed a break. Even though I found it tedious, Megan's company was comforting, though the ride would grow silent when she slept. The monotony of towering trees, sprawling plains, and endless fields played tricks on my mind. The persistent rumble of the wheels and the silent, stagnant air, punctuated only by the hum of the engine, added to the oppressive sameness. This was the aspect of driving I loathed. Only the occasionally passing street signs provided any change, offering glimpses of nearby towns or warnings of local wildlife. After 8 hours of uninterrupted driving one day, I hadn't encountered a single town or city. Normally I'd pass through 3 or 4 in a day's journey, but this time, the landscape remained stubbornly unpopulated. Yawning through my third can of Red Bull, I considered pulling over in the middle of nowhere to catch some sleep. Then, just as the fuel alarm blinked to life, a weathered sign appeared. Almost too late, marking the turnoff to a town. There was a subtle unease as I veered onto the exit. It struck me as odd that I could not recall any prior signs. Yet the promise of fuel and a potential resting place outweighed my apprehension. The indicator ticking, the steering wheel turning, and Megan stirring beside me, I guided the car towards a place named Graysol. As the sun began its descent beyond the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty fuel station, Megan and I pulled in, grateful for a chance to stretch our legs. The flickering fluorescent lights above hummed intermittently, adding to the eerie atmosphere of the isolated place. "We'll fill up here," I said, cutting the engine. Megan nodded, glancing around at the quiet surroundings.
And where is here?
She muttered. "A possible place to sleep." I stepped out of the car into the cool evening air, the scent of petrol and dust lingering. The station was deserted, except for a lone figure behind the counter, engrossed in a magazine. I pushed open the creaking door and entered, a small bell chiming softly. The service worker looked up, a slight smile spreading across his young face as he greeted me with a nod. "Evening," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the empty convenience store. The worker stared at me, his smile showing teeth slightly. "Just the gas today?" he said, a slight jubilation in his voice. "Yeah, thanks," I replied absent-mindedly, pulling out some cash. "Cash all good?" "Of course!" His reply was almost a little too enthusiastic, lingering on the R. I handed him the cash and took my change. His smile widened. "Have a great day, sir." "Yeah, thanks," I replied, turning away. "Have a great day, sir." I paused, turned and looked at the man again. His smile remained, showing all his teeth. The annoying part was that he seemed unhappy. Not the soul-crushing service kind of unhappy, but there was something in his eyes. I couldn't quite describe it. "Have a great day, sir." He punctuated each word, eyes locked onto mine. "I will, thank you." With the ring of the bell, I walked out the door, still feeling his gaze on me. His smile never wavered. As I fueled the car, I glanced back into the store. He was staring at me. I couldn't tell if he was laughing or crying behind his gritted teeth, but that damn smile remained burned into my mind. Getting back in the car, I shook myself. I was more than a little on edge.
You okay, babe?
Megan asked. I started up the car before pulling away. "That was a chilling experience," I said with a forced laugh that even I didn't believe.
How so?
"That guy was just creepy. No wonder he's out here at this station." There was a pause.
Sure.
Megan replied. Leaving the gas station behind, we ventured deeper into Graysol, a town seemingly caught in a perpetual state of half-hearted development. Quaint shops with faded facades lined the main street, their windows showcasing dusty displays of antiques and local crafts. A solitary traffic light flickered intermittently, causing an unsettling glow over cracked sidewalks and neglected flower beds.
The road less traveled.
Megan remarked, peering out of the window.
This truly is the explorer's way.
"Yeah, a strange vibe," I agreed, my thoughts still lingering on the encounter with the service worker. As we drove further, we passed a weathered sign promising accommodations ahead. Following its directions, we found ourselves at a modest motel inside town. The car park was empty, except for a few cars. their owners unseen in the fading light of dusk. I guess this will do for the night, I said, pulling into a parking space. Stepping out of the car, we were met with curious glances from the sparse population, their greeting smiles short, but their stares lingering a little too long. The motel seemed to stand in silent anticipation, its neon sign buzzing faintly against the growing darkness. I leaned in close and whispered to Megan, "What's with the looks?" She glanced at me, brushing off my concern.
It's a small town.
She replied in a normal tone.
We're tourists in a backwater town. Of course we're gonna get looks.
After locking the car doors, we walked towards the somewhat inviting light of the lobby. Just as I approached the door with Megan in the lead, I paused and glanced over my shoulder. There was a whisper on the wind, a fleeting sound or thought. The caffeine was wearing off, and with a violent shake of my head, I dismissed it and entered the cramped lobby. "Hello there, dears," the wizened caretaker woman creaked, her smile forming like cracks on old porcelain. "A room for the two of you?" Megan smiled back brightly.
Yes, just for one night, please. One double bed.
The woman nodded in acceptance and wrote down our details in a dusty ledger. As I glanced at the ledger, it seemed unusually sparse, lacking additional names or reservations. "A couple's room. Names, please?"
I'm Megan, and this is Michael.
"Megan and Michael. I do like the letter M." The chuckle rattled through her, revealing teeth that seemed too white against weathered skin. Megan shifted slightly, her gaze wandering around the lobby with a casual interest. "And where are you off to?" Megan stepped closer to respond, but I cut him with my question. "We're just travelers. How much for the room?" Her grin widened. $40 for the room?" She offered the key to us, seemingly pulling it from thin air. "Thank you," I said, taking it cautiously. Leaning against the counter, I counted out the notes before passing the key to Megan. "Is there a place to eat around here?" I asked, handing over the money. "Eat?" She seemed surprised. "Best not to linger when it gets dark. There's a vending machine with snacks. I'm sure you'll be okay." I glanced outside. Darkness had fallen swiftly, cloaking the town like a shroud. "Okay," I nodded. "Do many people come this way?" I asked, thinking back on the ledger. The caretaker paused before she took the money, her smile widening slightly. "They come when they are needed." She took the money. "Have a great day, sir." "Sure." I turned to step away, but her grip suddenly tightened on my wrist, making me look back. Her eyes pleaded, and her teeth gleamed brightly as her smile stretched her wrinkled skin. I stood there in confusion as her grip tightened. "Have a great day, sir." I was shocked by her sudden strength and didn't move. Megan intervened smoothly.
Good night, ma'am.
Her tone was breezy. The grip released as suddenly as it had tightened. Megan was next to me with a cheerful expression. I checked my wrists and looked back at the caretaker. Her smile was still wide, but her mouth was closed. What just happened? Nodding awkwardly, I hurriedly left, my instincts telling me to keep her in sight, to not turn my back. Only when we opened and closed the lobby door did I dare to relax.
She seems nice,
Megan remarked, glancing back at the lobby with a dismissive shrug. I huddled close to Megan as we approached our vehicle. "Didn't she seem a bit odd to you?" I asked. "She grabbed me, Meg, like full-on Crypt Keeper clutched my wrist," I said with a touch of annoyance.
I wouldn't call that a grab. I just thought she touched your hand in like a friendly way.
She laughed as she pulled her suitcase out.
Probably thought you were flirting or something.
I wasn't.
Relax, Mike. Older folks can be like that.
I wanted to press the issue further, but Megan brushed me off again. Was it just me? Glancing back, I saw the caretaker woman in the distance, appearing to close up shop. She gave us a glance and a smile before hastily dropping the shutters. Shaking off the odd feeling, I turned back to find Megan making her way obliviously to the door. I took my bag and followed dutifully. She slid the key into the lock and opened the door effortlessly. Surprisingly, the room appeared to have been recently renovated. There was a modest TV and a large double bed. The calming blue interior was a stark contrast to the worn exterior of the motel. Megan responded with a jump, flopping onto the bed.
Not bad for $40.
I smiled at her enthusiasm. "Hungry?"
Not really. Didn't she mention something about a vending machine?
She dug her phone charger out of her bag. I guess all the local eateries close early due to the small population. That's how I interpreted her warning. I added uncertainly. Maybe there's a high crime rate.
You think there'd be lots of criminals in a place this small?
The sound of her phone accepting charge punctuated her question. I don't know. Why else would she warn us about going out? Megan shrugged.
Maybe she's just cautious.
I nodded mainly to myself and started towards the bathroom. This place better have running hot water. The shower was a stark contrast to the room. Perhaps they ran out of budget before getting to the tiles and plumbing. At least the light worked, and more importantly, the hot water. I let it steam up before indulging in the warm embrace. My mind wandered, as shower thoughts tend to encourage, lingering on today's drive. I struggled to remember any major landmarks or anything of note. There was nothing. I kept pressing on the thought, all notions of washing myself forgotten. Beneath the roar of the running water, there was another sound. A buzzing, a whisper, a constant tone. I couldn't recall ever hearing it before. As the water began to go cold, a memory resurfaced. I did pass signs on the road, all pointing to Graysol. It made sense, but for 8 hours? The buzz grew louder as I pushed further in my mind. The distance on the signs to Graysol was always the same. It was always the next exit. A loud knock on the bathroom door startled me.
You good?
Megan asked. A shock of cold shivered me awake. I was freezing. Yeah, I'm good. I'll be out in a moment. The sudden silence of the room was deafening. I strained to hear the buzz, but there was nothing. I made my way to the mirror, broke open my toiletry bag, and began to brush my teeth. I kept my eyes down towards the sink, focusing on the routine. A nagging feeling in my gut made me hesitate to look up, so I kept my head firmly angled down. With clean teeth, I spat out the toothpaste and looked up out of habit. My reflection stared back at me. But there was something else. I couldn't see it. Behind me were just broken white tiles. But something was there. Dread crept through me as I remained still, locked in a staring contest with my own reflection. I dared not move. The buzzing returned, a presence gripping my very being. It was as if I stood on the edge of a cliff, knowing full well that stepping off would be fatal. I knew that if I glanced slightly to the left of my shoulder, my life would be over. Time passed, I don't know how long, before I closed my eyes. The feeling slowly dissipated, and I stepped away from the sink and out the bathroom door into the bedroom. My breath was heavy, buried deep in my stomach. Every movement felt like dragging boulders. Only when I opened my eyes and saw Megan lying casually on the bed with her phone did I let out a shudder of relief.
You were in there a while.
She remarked, not looking up.
You better get some sleep.
I think so. I made my way to the edge of the bed and climbed in. My neck stiffened taut. I couldn't even glance behind me. Something was there, and I knew it meant the end. Laying on my back, I turned my head toward Megan, a protest forming on my lips. It got stuck in my throat as the oppressive blanket of dread fell over me, digging into my back and spine. I stopped myself as my stomach dropped again. The pits of my being filled with hollow trepidation. The words were stuck in my throat. I wanted to say it, to desperately convey that something was wrong, but terror engulfed me.
What's that, babe?
Megan asked, her tone light. Nothing. I just need sleep, I muttered in defeat. The feeling receded. The disquieting unease left me. She smiled and gave me a peck on the cheek.
I'll leave you alone tonight so you can rest up. Maybe tomorrow will be better.
I could only nod. It felt as if my blood had been drained from my body. Surely I looked hollow or my skin void of color. But her reaction remained cheerful and flirty. She turned away, set her phone's alarm for the morning, and nestled into the covers. I did not sleep. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling. Time passed in a haze, the seconds blending into minutes, minutes stretching into infinity. My eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the thin curtains, and I began to notice the minute details of the ceiling above me. Tiny cracks splintered across the plaster, the paint already beginning to peel from its fresh coat, revealing faint water stains and the occasional cobweb as a finishing flourish. I could make out the slight variations in texture where the roller marks overlapped during the last haphazard paint job. My mind fixated on these imperfections, a desperate attempt to anchor myself in the mundane. Yet, the oppressive feeling lingered, a weight on my chest. It wasn't as strong as before, but its presence was undeniable. The sense of absoluteness gnawed at me from the left, a silent reminder of whatever unseen horror lay just out of sight. Every instinct boiled over, urging me to keep my gaze forward, to not turn my head even the slightest bit. The thought of what might be there, lurking in the shadows, was too much to bear. My body remained rigid, my breath shallow and controlled, as if any sudden movement or noise might draw its attention. Megan's soft snores provided a fragile comfort. I wanted to wake her, to share the burden, but the words wouldn't come. I was trapped, a prisoner to this unseen menace. As the hours dragged on, sleep eluded me. The darkness outside deepened, the walls pressing in as if to crush the very air from my lungs. I clung to the small details of the ceiling, using them as a lifeline to stave off the encroaching fear, knowing that dawn was still hours away. I couldn't bear another moment of this. Slowly, I lifted myself from the bed and made my way to the door, keeping my head still. Hunger had set in. I moved silently, cautiously crossing the cold car park to the glow of the vending machine. Inside, a variety of snacks looked faded from the sun. I pulled out a note and fed it to the machine, the normality of the action distracting me from turning around. The machine accepted the note, and I pressed the combination, awaiting something to take my mind off the dark. The spool spurred to life as the snack slid forward and then down. I bent down to retrieve it. That's when the chanting began. I turned slowly towards the sound, an uncomfortable twisting in my gut rising to my throat. Ahead, a gathering of people stood in a crescent shape inside the park by the motel, including the service worker and caretaker woman. They surrounded a small pile of random items, illuminated faintly by the park lights. Even from this distance, I could discern the silhouettes: a pair of glasses, a map, a wallet, and keys. The chant resonated through the still night, each syllable rolling off their tongues with a rhythm that felt both ancient and powerful. The words were guttural and melodic, filled with a haunting cadence that sent shivers down my spine. As the group circled the mundane items laid out in ritualistic precision, their voices rose and fell in a foreign, almost otherworldly harmony. The air seemed to vibrate with each intonation, weaving an invisible web of dread around me. My heart pounded and my skin prickled as if the very air was charged with dark energy. Though I couldn't understand the words, the intent behind them was clear. Summoning, binding, compelling. Fragments of the chant felt disturbingly familiar, echoing with the weight of forgotten rituals. Each phrase seemed to hold a hidden meaning, a dark promise, as if the chant itself was a living entity reaching out to ensnare any who dared listen. The figures began to turn. Despite being about 20 meters away, I unconsciously crossed the car park and stood by the street, now able to make out their faces as they surveyed me. Their wide smiles and mouths agape revealed what felt like too many teeth. The chant continued, their mouths twisting to form the sounds, yet their eyes betrayed terror. Pleading looks from all of them tore through me, screaming at me to leave now. But their welcoming bodies stretched wide, inviting me to cross the asphalt street. The clash of emotions, fear, menace, and warmth, all fought one another to be the primary feeling. My mind almost acquiesced, the scratching ache of what was behind me pushing me forward. It beckoned me to join them. My body protested and screamed. The dread built as it sensed my thoughts. To turn and walk, I would step into abject horror. Forward was the loving call of familiarity. With a great, uncertain step, I turned my back on the gathering and walked back to our room. As I turned away from the gathering, my body protested violently. My heart sank, breaths long and deep. Each step back towards the motel felt like wading through molasses. An invisible force clawed at me, pulling me back towards the chanting group. The ache in my chest intensified, as if something was trying to rip my soul from my body. My muscles tensed and strained with every movement. The chant almost engulfed me, surrounding me in a maw of alien chants. The distance to my room seemed to stretch interminably, the dim lights of the motel flickering in and out of focus. Extremely bright in one moment and pitch black the next. Each step forward was a battle against an unseen force that grew stronger with every passing second. My mind reeled, assaulted by a barrage of whispered temptations and threats that made my skin crawl. I could feel the dark energy digging into me, its tendrils wrapping around my very essence, threatening to pull me apart. A cold sweat broke out of my forehead, and my vision blurred with the effort of resisting the pull. Every fiber of my being screamed in protest, urging me to turn back to the comfort of the gathering behind me. The door to our room was just ahead. My hand trembled as I reached out, fingers barely grazing the doorknob. I looked forward as I felt the door, but my consciousness felt miles away. Each touch of reality was such a distance, it bedraggled my mind. With a Herculean effort, I twisted the knob and stumbled inside, collapsing against the door as it swung shut behind me. Everything was quiet. The room was dark. The sight of Megan lying asleep on the bed brought everything into focus. My heart pounded in my ears, but I was slowly coming back to its senses. I looked around the dark room. I was here. Everything was back in its place. I strained again to hear the outside. Nothing. I paused and hesitated to look over my shoulder. Nothing. I turned and cautiously looked over my left shoulder to the door. Nothing. I locked the door slowly, made my way to the bed and crawled inside. I felt I wanted to say something to Megan or awaken her, but something held me back. The fear I felt before was distant, lingering in the back of my mind. The thought was different now. It was almost as though it would become real if I acknowledged what happened. I listened one more time, trying to make out any sound of what was outside. Nothing. I slid closer to Megan, wrapped tightly around her, and chose to forget. Sleep was not too far behind. I woke in a sudden panic. Upright, I observed the surroundings. The nice, calm blue of the room was brightened by the subtle sun through the blinds. Morning had arrived, and Megan walked out of the bathroom brushing her teeth.
Sleep well?
She asked. I took a brief moment to stabilize myself and breathed deeply. I think it's best we keep moving, I replied slowly. She smiled and made her way back into the bathroom. By the time she finished up, I had packed our bags and was walking out the door.
Why the rush?
She laughed. I didn't stop. I opened the door and noticed our vehicle where we had parked it. I loaded it up and was ready to leave. Megan climbed into the passenger side with a confused grin. I had started the car.
Why so sudden? I have to drop the key off, babe.
I drove closer to the lobby. The shutters were still down. I pulled the handbrake and took the key from her hand. I'll drop him off. Be 2 moments. I got out and hurried to the chute. Glancing around, the park seemed normal in the light, but the ominous feeling lingered in the air. Keys deposited, I rushed to the car and slammed the doors shut, locking the doors for good measure. Megan rolled her eyes and sighed. With glances in the mirror and a careful foot, I made my way towards the highway and the open road. I kept checking. Every minute or so, I surveyed the town as we traveled. We were up pretty early for the cozy little town, which seemed deserted. It was not long until we had left the confines of Graysall and were back out through the woods.
You gonna tell me what that was about?
Megan asked. I looked at her and feigned a nonchalant smile. Cozy little hideaway towns are not my thing. I'm keen for the big smoke, as they say.
So you didn't sleep?
I didn't know why I didn't tell her. Part of me wanted to keep the truth as a lie. I wanted to keep her safe from whatever that was. I sighed as I relented and opened up my thoughts. Alright, so another part of me screamed in terror as a rising feeling tingled my neck. I stopped myself again. I glanced in the rearview mirror and I could sense it again. It was behind me in the back, but all I could see was the back window and the suitcases lying on the seats. It was still here. I couldn't look again. I looked away from the mirror and straight ahead. Yeah, average sleep, I hesitantly stated.
Are you okay?
I paused and nodded. Megan seemed to have accepted that answer and went back to idling. I wanted to say more. I was screaming in my mind, but it stopped me. The tension in the car was palpable, my mind racing with the events of the night before and what lingers behind us. Megan leaned back in her seat, quietly scrolling through her phone. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but the unease in the pit of my stomach wouldn't let up. Minutes passed, and the silence between us grew heavier. The winding road seemed to stretch endlessly, the trees blurring into a monotonous green. Suddenly, a faint flash of red and blue lights appeared in the distance, reflecting off the rearview mirror. My pulse quickened, but I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to look back. Megan shifted in her seat, noticing the lights as well.
Are those...
She trailed off, her voice tinged with concern. I swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Probably just a routine check, I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. The lights grew brighter, closer, casting an eerie glow inside the car. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing the dread I felt deep inside. The urge to glance in the mirror was overwhelming, but I fought it, knowing that looking back might reveal more than just the police car. The siren blipped, a short, sharp burst that made me flinch. Megan turned to me, her eyes wide with worry.
What should we do?
Just stay calm, I replied, though my own nerves were fraying. I'll pull over. I eased the car to the side of the road, the lights now glaring in full force through the back window. My hand shook as I shifted the car into park and rolled down the window. The officer approached, his silhouette framed by the flashing lights. Megan's fingers brushed against my arm, a silent gesture of support. Good morning, the officer said, his tone neutral but firm. License and registration, please. Of course, sir. I pulled out my license and the relevant paperwork from the glove compartment. I handed them over as he began to scrutinize. His mirrored glasses glared at me, forcing me to look away. You know why I pulled you over, sir? No, I do not. Your taillight's out. Oh, it's a rental. It was definitely good when we left New York. Yes, I could see that. A pause. I looked up as he continued to read the papers. His face was stern and aged, poring over each of the documents I handed him. Did you notice anything last night in town? I gripped the wheel in surprise. The itch and clawing returned, digging into my spine. Like what, sir? He looked at me. I felt my head move with strain to look at him. Something invisible, a dark presence, was gripping my head. Did you notice anything at all, sir? No noises, no strange occurrences? Another grip on my arm, this one from Megan. There was concern in her touch. I could feel her eyes on me, sensing something was wrong. No, nothing at all. Slept like a baby. The pause dragged on for too long. Each second felt like an eternity as the presence tightened its hold, sending waves of terror through my body. So, you're a foreigner, driving through the state in a car with a broken taillight that you hired from another state. He sighed audibly. Too much paperwork. He handed me the papers, which I gladly took, but they didn't move. He was gripping them tight as I tugged at them. Got anything to say to me, sir? There was a menacing threat in the tone of his voice. I glanced down and saw he was gripping his pistol still in the holster. My neck suddenly craned upwards as an unseen force began controlling my movements. My entire body was on fire from fear. My muscles ached as the invisible claws dug deeper into my shoulders. My eyes shook from the pain as my cheeks tightened, pulling further and further apart in a smile too large for my own face. Have a great day, sir. The policeman smiled widely back, almost in wicked greeting. His hand left the gun as his smile grew wider to match my own. And you have a great day too, sir. And that was The Thing Over My Shoulder by Twilight. Very clever, very clever. So, what I liked about this story is that you're not entirely sure what the danger, the threat is. You've got this interesting little small town, which gives me kind of Silent Hill vibes in a way, because it's able to kind of... I mean, I suppose Silent Hill doesn't really move, but you always find a way to it, you know what I mean? In the weirdest way. Like the fact that he was able to pass basically an entire day, always passing a sign that made it sound like it was always going to be there. Very interesting, very weird. But then there's no dangerous entities or anything like that. You've got kind of some culty activity going on in the town. That's probably what I would describe it as. A lot of detail, a lot of descriptions, which after a point got a little bit too much, but for the most part, quite good, quite interesting. You've got this kind of a creepy smiling phenomenon going on, probably due to whatever force is controlling the town, I suppose. Which then, yet again, makes me think of the film Smile. Quite funny how that worked out. Um, I think I think it's pretty interesting because yet again, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. You're aware that there is some kind of an effect, but there's no real danger per se. And the fact that they're able to kind of leave and everything seems fine and it doesn't try to keep them there and they're not becoming a sacrifice or anything, it's strange. So clearly they do want people there, or maybe they don't really. The more you think about it, because I mean they were doing their activities, their culty chanting and all that stuff. And they told the couple not to come out at night, avoid dark times and stuff. It mainly sounded like this town wanted to be left alone, really, to kind of carry on doing what they do, which is interesting. So you get quite a lot of creepiness going on, a good level of psychological fuckery as well, which is interesting. I thought it was pretty good. I did think it was pretty good because it's not one of those where it's like, oh my goodness, there's a monster and we're all gonna die. No, it was nice that it was this feeling, this dread, this unknown problem, And I quite like that. I quite like that a lot. It really does make you think a bit. As always, thank you so much to Jenny to being a lovely guest voice on the video. It's always great. It's always great to have more than one voice. I think it just kind of helps add a little bit. Because although I can do so many amazing voices, it's still nice to change it up every once in a while. It kind of keeps it a bit fresh. But yeah, no, I'm pretty pleased with that. This has been Nate at Night, and I've really had a good time, and I sure hope you have too. We'll see you for whatever's next. Take care. My roommate let something into our apartment, and I don't think it's going to leave. I'm not exactly sure where to turn with this. Paranormal forums have been no help, and most places on the internet just start talking about salt, iron, and calling Sam and Dean to fix the issue. This is real though, and it's getting worse, and I'm fucking terrified. About a week ago, I came home late from work at my usual time. I usually get off around 10:30, and my roommate Jackson works pretty early, so it's not uncommon to see him passed out on the couch. That night, though, he was wide awake, sitting and watching a scary movie with the lights off. I greeted him and tossed my keys on the table, but as I went to reach for the light, he turned and yelled at me.
Leave it off!
I jumped back, startled. What the fuck, man?
Sorry.
He settled back on the couch, his eyes turning towards the screen again.
We're just trying to enjoy the atmosphere of the movie.
I looked around and didn't see anyone else in the room. Tension filled the air. Who's we? You got a mouse in your pocket? I joked, hoping to lighten things and make it feel normal again. Instead, he turned to me with wide, glassy eyes and corrected himself.
Me. I'm trying to enjoy the atmosphere of the movie.
He slowly turned his head back towards the screen, where some mass killer was stalking his victim. A combination of the intensity in his eyes, the dark room, the scary movie, and the way he'd reacted to my arrival sent a shiver up my spine and put a sick feeling in my stomach. Well, whatever, man. I tried to shake it off. See you in the morning. I walked away towards my room, but he didn't respond. His eyes glued on the screen as he silently watched the movie with a stiff-backed posture. I turned back to him one last time before I shut my door, and I could swear I saw something out of the corner of my eye standing next to the couch. I did a double take, and it was gone. Instead, I noticed Jackson had turned his head toward me. His eyes were still glassy, and his mouth stretched itself into a toothy smile. I quickly shut my bedroom door and locked it. I flicked on my TV and put on some random YouTube videos to hopefully distract me from what I just saw. Was he fucking with me? Trying to scare me? What the hell had just happened? Jackson had always been a bit of a prankster. One time he hid the vacuum in my room and set it up to an electrical switch on a timer. Damn thing went off at 3 in the morning and scared the shit out of me. That was funny. This was not. I spent the rest of the night laying in bed and staring at my TV with this bizarre smile imprinted on my brain. I thought about getting up and confronting him, but before I knew it, I heard the TV shut off in the living room and him go to his room and close the door. Any expectation I had of him coming to my door, knocking, apologizing, and explaining what the hell just happened died. Instead, I decided to try and get some sleep and ask him in the morning. Sure, it was weird, and yes, it creeped me out, but at the time I didn't realize I was living in what would become a nightmare, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt and shrugged it off. I can hear you wondering why I didn't just book it right then and there, but the guy had been my roommate for 3 years with barely any issues. He was a nice dude, with no history of anything weird as far as I knew, and it was much easier to assume it was a strange night and my eyes and brain were playing tricks on me after a long night of work. I convinced myself it was a badly timed joke on his part, and in time I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke to find Jackson sitting at the kitchen table, eating a bowl of cereal and scrolling on his phone. I could smell coffee brewing in the pot.
Morning, dude.
He said in his typical cheerful tone, not looking up from his breakfast.
Made coffee. Help yourself.
Morning. I side-eyed him as I walked through the kitchen and finally he caught my gaze.
What?
He shot me a confused look and shrugged his shoulders as he spooned some more cereal into his mouth. Last night, dude. Not funny. I couldn't believe he was playing stupid with me. You actually freaked me the hell out. He laughed and shook his head.
Sorry, man. I was just fucking with you. I guess the horror movie put me in a mood.
I actually remember breathing a sigh of relief. I'd figured he was messing with me, but hearing it confirmed made me feel a lot better. I don't mind a prank now and then, man. Just save it for when I'm not exhausted. I poured myself some coffee and started heading back towards my room to try and relax during my day off.
You got it, brother.
He raised his bowl to me into cheers and smiled a normal smile. But as I walked away, I heard his tone change and lower to be almost imperceptible. He spoke words that once again filled my gut with ice.
We'll try to be more considerate next time.
What did you just say? I turned to him again.
Me?
He said with a mouthful of cereal.
Nothing.
You definitely said something, I insisted.
Dude, you are being weird as hell.
He got up and put his now empty bowl in the sink.
Listen, I'm sorry I messed with you last night, but I promise I didn't say shit though.
Again, I know what I heard, but he was convincing as hell. It was easy to trick myself into thinking I was psyching myself out. There was no reason the guy would be gaslighting me. At worst, he was just messing with me, and if I told myself I just needed to let it go, everything would go back to normal. I guess I'm still just tired and a little tweaked out from last night, I said to him. I sipped my coffee and headed towards my room again. Sorry, man.
No worries.
He said, heading towards his room as well.
Sorry I tweaked you with my joke.
I thought that would be that. But 2 nights later, things got way worse. I woke up at about 1:30 to the sound of scratching at my door. It was like a dog begging to be let in, despite the fact that neither Jackson or I have a dog. I wiped the sleep from my eyes and stared at the door with an intense focus. The sound continued. Small scratches, short and quick. It made me think a bit of scurrying rats gnawing on support beams in the walls. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could and got closer to the door. I pressed my ear to the wood and could feel vibrations of whatever was scratching on the other side. Jackson! I called out, unsure if I was expecting a response.
What's up, man?
I heard him right away, but not next to my door. He sounded like he was in the living room. I flung the door open to nothing. Moonlight crept in through the window and cast an eerie blue over the apartment, but Jackson wasn't there. No rat, no dog, no roommate. Nothing to have made the noise and no one to have called back to me. Maybe I should have been scared, but honestly, I was irritated. He was still trying to mess with me, and I just wasn't in the mood. I walked across the hall to his door and knocked on it aggressively. Jack! I almost shouted, but thought better. I kept my tone firm and knocked again. Jack, what the fuck, man? Silence. I pressed my ear against his door. Jack? I said again in a softer tone. He didn't respond. I tried his knob, and his door wasn't locked. As I turned the handle, this creeping dread filled me that something awful was waiting for me on the other side of that door. Hey man, are you alright in there? I slowly pushed the door open, and as the room slowly came into view, I saw Jackson sitting on his bed with his back to me. His posture was stiff like before while he was watching the movie. Hands on his knees, his body still as a statue. Dude, what the hell is... My words caught in my throat as the rest of the view came into view. I still can't fully believe what I saw standing there. A figure stood next to Jack. Tall, I would guess almost 7 feet. A sheet was draped over it like an old ghost costume, but without the eye holes. Just a white sheet with what looked to be a person underneath.
I'm fine.
Jackson spoke, but not alone. The thing underneath the sheet spoke with him in unison, its gravelly, rotten voice tangled with his.
I'm just hanging out with my new friend.
I almost screamed, but I was so goddamn scared that at that moment I was frozen in place. Something about this made me realize this was no joke. The thing under the sheet gave off the worst air of danger I'd ever felt in my life, like staring down the barrel of a gun.
He came knocking the other night.
They both spoke, the thing just a half second before Jack though, like it was guiding his voice.
I let him in. He likes it here. So warm and inviting.
I backed away slowly. A terror filled me and told me to flee. I felt like if I ran, it would chase me, like locking eyes with a predator in the wild.
We can all be friends now. The best of friends. Jackson says you're easy to scare.
It was speaking alone now.
Show me.
With that, it moved across the room, and then it was directly in front of me. It didn't walk or run. It was like it fucking fast-forwarded. Startled, I stumbled backwards and into the wall behind me, cracking my head in a framed picture. I stumbled to my feet and looked up. Jackson was once again wearing that stiff smile and standing next to this thing. This intruder.
Come on, brother.
They said together.
Let's all watch something scary.
The sheet lifted ever so slightly, and a gaunt grey arm slid from underneath. Thin, bony fingers reached for me and snagged the collar of my shirt as I attempted to bolt down the hall into the front door.
We can all live together. No need to run.
The voice got muddier, uglier. It sounded like it was underwater in distorted, shredded vocal cords. I flung open the front door and flew into the hallway. The hall lights burned my eyes for a second as I ran to the stairs. All around me, at every apartment door, I heard knocking as I tore my way down the hallway. I saw some people opening their doors to find out what was going on. Each of them went blank as soon as they did. I watched some of them fling the door open, ready to scream at whoever was knocking so late, but their expression dropped and their eyes went as glassy as Jack's. I jumped down, skipping 3 to 4 steps at a time, my bare feet slapping against the cold vinyl floors of the building's hallways. More and more doors opened, people standing there frozen at the threshold, and those tall, sheet-covered entities standing next to them. Some were guiding them back into their homes. Some just watched me as I moved as quickly as I could down the hall. I burst out through the front door and into the warm night air. I must have ran 3 or 4 blocks before the realization hit me that I was in my pajama pants, no phone, no wallet, no keys, no shoes, and no fucking idea what to do. I ended up finding an all-night diner and let me use their phone. I thought about calling the cops. But what do I say? Ghosts have taken over my apartment building and the residents are hypnotized? Possessed? Nothing I could say wouldn't sound insane. I would get treated like a fucking crackpot. I called my sister. I wasn't even sure what to say to her. I told her something was wrong with Jackson. He was acting crazy, and I was not comfortable staying in that apartment anymore. I've been here for 3 days now. I don't know what to do anymore. At the urging of my sister, I called the police to at least do a wellness check on Jackson. I was terrified of sending anyone to that apartment building, but they told us they checked on him and everything seemed fine. He answered all their questions normally, told them he had pulled a bad joke on me and he was okay. This was not a joke, and I feel like I'm going crazy. My sister Ashley and her husband are urging me to just go home and talk it out with him, or at least get my things. I don't know what to do, though. I feel like I'm losing my mind. And that was My Roommate Let Something Into Our Apartment and I Don't Think It's Going to Leave by Dead and Spread. It's a great name, really great name. So, first off, I'd like to thank Sean, our new additional voice actor for this one. He's I gotta say he's got a nice tone to his voice. Very creative, very good. He sent me some clips of him before doing kind of like Gravemind from Halo, like real deep baritone kind of voices, which is pretty nice. So I was quite excited to kind of really give him something to really stretch his vocal cords out and kind of just have a bit of fun with this one. So let me go ahead and just show you his YouTube channel as well. This is how you can show your support to him and check out the things he's up to and everything. I'll obviously pop a link in the description below. I'm very excited to see what else we might get out of this guy, you know. So I'll keep my eye on you, Sean. I'll keep my eye on you. Right, let's go ahead and jump into this story and kind of talk a bit about it. So I quite liked it. It's one of those stories that, yet again, makes you feel like you have an idea of what's going on. You feel like you can kind of break it down. You don't have any confirmation about what's going on, which is fine. I like a little air of mystery where you kind of piece it together yourself. Maybe you figured it out, maybe you don't. Maybe there's weird rules in play that you don't know. Hard to say. It's great fun. So obviously you've got some sort of an entity, like I suppose you could say, you call it kind of like a ghouly person, kind of under a sheet. They're probably some kind of so we're talking either maybe like a ghost. We're talking about, I mean, it could be a demon. We're not entirely sure, are we? It could be any kind of thing that is not human, for sure. Could have been human at one point, but clearly is not alive anymore. That's the vibes I'm getting. Usually makes me think of demon or some kind of a creepy ghosty kind of thing. Which a long time ago, in the Badlands Boys podcast, we covered a bunch of varieties of like ghosts and stuff, because there's a variety of different versions, like banshees, mares, etc., etc. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but the fact is there are so many of similar things that still have different qualities that kind of really give them a bit more flavor and specialty, if you will. So I don't know exactly which one this would fall into camp-wise. It clearly has a way to be able to possess people. Later on in the story, obviously when he's escaping, and you see there's more than one, then I'm wondering, is it like is it a clone of itself? Is it able to like duplicate, for example? Or are there multiple in this apartment building, for example? We don't know. Yeah, again, there's not quite enough information to really piece anything else together. My initial guess is that it itself is duplicating. I don't know how exactly it can do that, you know, because when you think about it, it was able to basically interact with everybody except for our main character. And I found that to be kind of weird, right? Because he wanted to, this entity clearly wanted to, but didn't have like a version of itself to specifically already get the main character. And yet it was very easily able to do it with all the other people. Maybe it's been doing it for a while, we're not sure. It only sounds like things have been going on for a couple of days, but for all we know, in the rest of the apartments, this could have been happening earlier. We just don't know. But I did enjoy the story. I thought there were plenty of little creepy moments, which was good. I wouldn't say it's like a super scary story. I don't think it's quite that. But I think it's got enough to really kind of give you a level of like, ooh, you know? And I think that's pretty good. I think you can't go wrong with that for a story. I like the fact that we don't know exactly how it ends. You know, the issue of it's a cliffhangery kind of a thing where, you know, you could probably write more of a story, but you don't need to. And I think that's the best part about this, because it does feel like it's like an actual forum post, like of somebody's actual experience, and I think that's great. I think it's really fun, and I've always enjoyed that kind of a style, because it just adds I'm gonna say a little level of realism, not super realism, but you know, it just kind of immerses you a little bit more in the world. You know, I think that's quite good. So yeah, for sure, I really liked it. I'll definitely keep Sean in mind for more voice acting roles while I kind of get everything up to speed and in a better place, while I kind of keep getting my footing over here in the States. Well, because there's a lot of things that I want to do. It's just kind of figuring out how I can schedule everything appropriately so that things can happen and that I don't always lose track of things and fall behind on videos, for example. But anyway, it's really good. This has been Nate at Night. I have had a great little time, and I sure hope you have too. What kind of ghostly weird entity do you think this was? I'm really curious about your opinions, so definitely down below let me know, okay? Really excited to hear what your thoughts are. For all we know, it could be something I had never heard of. It could be a completely different culture kind of thing. I don't know. I'm really excited to see if somebody knows exactly what this is, or at least something very similar in mind. Very excited. We will see you for whatever's next. Take care. David watches me. I call him David. He has been watching me. In the last month or so, I've seen horrors beyond my own understanding. Growing up, I've been a massive fan of the horror genre. When I was young, before I could remember everything clearly, my mother would take me and my older sibling to the library to get Goosebumps CDs. I must have been no younger than 3, maybe 4. This is what my mother told me anyways. But that is neither here nor there. This is just to say I was not easy to scare growing up. I still am not easy to scare. I was born in Montana on the 3rd of March 2003, and after I turned 4 or 5, my dad had to get a different job as the housing crisis had begun. He had no college degree or any experience that would be considered worthwhile, so he would take what he could get. That would lead us to move down into Sheridan, Wyoming. Sheridan is just under the Montana border, with a couple thousand people living there. We moved here because of the grandparents on my mom's side. They moved here way back, raising both my mom and uncle in this small town. With the help of that family, my dad got a job working as a teller for a bank. Not the most lucrative way of making money, but a way to make money nonetheless. And while this move to bumfuck nowhere did not affect me, my older sister was devastated. I had no school friends. I was just in preschool. My older sister, on the other hand, who had been in elementary school for some time, cried the whole car ride. My younger sister, born 3 years after me, did not even know what was going on. For me, everything was fine for years, despite my family having no money. I had the whole school experience with things such as puppy love, after-school activities, and spending time with friends. On my birthdays or Christmas, after I started to understand the financial situation my parents were in, I tried not asking for expensive toys or gadgets, in an attempt to make life easier for my parents, and for me to be less disappointed. The 5 of us were happy. Of course, all the other kids my age thought I was crazy. I didn't have a phone, the only console I had was a Wii. The Wii U had come out. And all the food we ate was great value or something similar to Walmart brand food. I was not popular, but overall I was well liked. And I would continue to embrace this life I built until middle school, 6th to 8th grade in Sheridan, when my first encounter happened. I remember it being winter, as snow was everywhere. The house we had in Sheridan was walking distance from the middle school. Back in those days, the neighbor kids, my older sister and I, would walk to and from school every day. It wasn't rare for one of us to stay a little longer to talk to a teacher or go do something else completely. We were all independent individuals. Hell, one of the neighbor kids only walked to school with us and not once walked back with us. During the winter, the group largely resembled that of the kids from A Christmas Story during the colder months, minus being chased. One day I would stay at school a little later than usual, and I had told that group to leave me behind. My English teacher wanted me to finish a project I had. She was worried as I was terrible with doing homework. I don't exactly remember if I finished or not. Probably not. I was a bit airheaded and typically forgot what all happened at school by the time I walked home. By the time I was outside walking home, the sun had begun to set. Not too unusual as it gets dark around 5 during the winter months. This meant if you had extracurriculars in this time, you almost always went home as the sun was setting. Something I didn't do often at the time, meaning this was a first to me. It wasn't eerie or anything, just a different time in the same place. The night sky was clear, but the air was freezing. My glasses would fog up as I breathed, trying to contain the heat leaving my mouth by having my coat cover the lower half of my face. The route I took home brought me through Kendrick Park, a lovely place in the spring, summer, and fall, but dull and lifeless in the winter. There's this path that goes up this hill that splits a miniature forest in half. This was before they built an improved path below the parking lot of the school to keep the hill in place. That wooded area always seemed much more vast and full as a kid than they actually were. We'd play in them often, tag and such, for hours, never seeming to reach any ends. Anyways, I was marching down this path, careful not to slip on the ice. There were, or are, lights that line the path illuminating the snow ahead of me. And of course, like your typical horror movie, there was a shuffling in the trees. That night was the first night I saw David. That is what I called him. That is what I still call him. David was a tall, nude man that terrified me. I'm not sure of his motives, but I'd say he was hunting me at times. It wasn't until I reached the bottom of the hill that I turned around to see him. He had no genitals. Thank fuck. But he was just standing there in this cold fucking weather. No clothing, no fur, just the mist being expelled through his mouth. I could only stare into his dark eyes, the pupils seeming to never end. It felt like an eternity, but it couldn't have been more than 5 minutes before I started to run. I ran. I began to sob, afraid to turn around, stumbling every so often as the weight of my backpack made it difficult to keep my balance. I'd make it home that night. I'm not sure if David even chased me. Crashing through the front door, my mom came to comfort me quick after hearing me cry. I don't remember much after that. According to my older sister, I blurted out something about a naked tall man, whose eyes were not his own. Mom, practically shitting herself, my sister's words, called the cops, but they didn't find anyone, or they couldn't find anyone. My mom was afraid, mad, confused. She would tell Dad what I said once he got home, and eventually even my grandfather caught wind of what happened. The two of them would go out and search for the cops without much success. The man was gone. I would later tell my sister about David. She had the idea of giving him his name to make it easier for me to tell her. I don't know if she believed me at the time, but she was a born skeptic like everyone in my family. Her reaction was one of confusion. But after that night, she would always walk closer to me when she could. She probably thought I just saw a man, just like my parents and police. The neighbor kids had took note of the police from the previous night. They would ask my sister and I, neither of us knowing what to say. I wouldn't say anything. My sister would speak for me, lying, saying that I found a lost dog or something and the police were just picking it up as it ran out the front door. Something like that. They didn't push for more details. I wouldn't see David again for months. Maybe over a year? I can't remember. Those details seem to be faded with time. I'd almost completely forgotten about David, but the fear from my first experience followed me even after the memory disappeared. I still remember the heat of the day from the second encounter with David. It was summer. I couldn't tell you the day or the exact time of when I saw him, as when you're a kid without ambition, summer passes you by so quick you lose track of time. I had a friend with me this next time, Justin. He was just like me, a kid with no ambition, little money, and doing whatever he can to entertain himself. The two of us would go around on our cheap bikes, buying snacks with change found in couches, watching TV, playing video games, swimming, etc., etc. On this day, we threw ice cream in a blender and made milkshakes with Great Value ice cream. It was a typical summer day for us until Justin got bored of the YouTube video that had auto-played. Justin would look at me and ask, "Did you know we have a basement?" I didn't, and I was intrigued. Justin lived in a house with a family above his home. I just assumed that there might have been a family below us if there was a basement. Justin would then ask, "Do you want to go down there and explore?" "Of course," I say, "of course." We had to go out the back door. The heat was beating down on the two of us. The basement hatch was just to the left of the back door. Justin opened it up, and we both went down, Justin leading me. There was no light. I suppose the light bulbs that were down here had burnt out years ago, someone leaving them on and never coming back down. It was clear that nobody had been down here in a while. Thankfully, Justin had brought a flashlight with him. There were no doors, only concrete imitating doorways. The cold layout of the basement resembled a home that lay above it, with walls and corners. Other than the rats and lone boxes, the basement was empty. The two of us would scrounge around the loose boxes, careful not to disturb any rats. They were largely filled with garbage. Many of the boxes were filled with old clothes, creepy dolls, and even some jewelry that looked expensive. When we came across anything that looked like treasure, one of us would cram the thing into one of our pockets. Justin found a ball and we passed it to each other in the dark for a minute before resuming our search. Lots of boring things. Old papers we did not want to read, and dusty books were quickly unpacked. The basement now looked like it was robbed. I mean, depending on how you look at it, we did rob it. "What the fuck?" Justin would scream. I would turn around, going to see what Justin was swearing over. David. He was blocking the way out. My blood ran cold. That winter, from several months before, suddenly flooded my thoughts, the cold feeling from that night returning to my face. I now have a better look at this thing. Using the false doorways as a reference, this thing was taller than the typical doors in a house, having to slouch to fit in the damn basement. It had thin hair that was illuminated by the sunlight coming from the only exit, a light that I now so desperately wanted to feel. And its eyes. Its fucking eyes. The pupils filled the entire eye, making them pitch black. Neither me nor Justin could be brought to move. A minute or two goes by of silence. Justin will make a slow inhale. "Who the fuck are you? What do you want?" Justin would scream, breaking the silence. The thing fucking smiled, slowly but noticeably. Shit. Without taking my eyes off of this thing, I reach for something, anything within a box near me. I grab an old picture frame and stand up once again. I was ready to throw whatever I grabbed at David. Justin began to breathe faster, beginning to panic. Leave us alone! Fuck off, you freak! Justin tossed an entire box, this one filled with old clothing we did not want. The box would fall short, coming to the thing's feet. David looked at it. Every move David made was slow, painfully slow. David picked up something from the pile that spilled out of the box. The two of us stopped breathing, waiting for him to attack or defend. Something. But the thing, David, left. Slowly. Without warning, without noise. The two of us just stood there, unable to move in fear that he was waiting for us. I broke my focus to look at Justin. He looked back. Hey. I broke the silence, hoping and praying that I didn't just call the creature back to us. Yeah, Justin responded, voice shaking. Let's go to my house. The two of us ran up the stairs, slamming into the back door, grabbing whatever. We got on our bikes and left. We did not speak, not until we were at my home. We acted as if nothing had happened. Justin would spend the night, and the two of us stayed up late into the next morning. Justin would move to his grandfather's a day later. A nice place just out of town. I'd ask about this later in life. Apparently something happened to the family above him overnight. His mom was the one who sent him to his grandpa, and she did not tell him why until he was an adult. Justin and I would still hang out. We arguably hung out more now. I'd practically spend the entire weekend over at Justin's grandfather's with Justin. Being close enough to town as it isn't a whole ordeal to get a ride, but just far enough out that we could do even more things. All those homes all have large backyards, large enough to do miniature camping trips. Being outside of town meant we could have large fires, fireworks, etc. Justin would end up getting a BB gun. While we never shot at any animals, we would practice our aim shooting these makeshift targets. The targets we set up were on this dingy shed. We would talk about the basement one day, the weekend before school started. Do you know what it was? The question came from Justin. I wanted to play dumb, but immediately knew what he was talking about. What? The thing that trapped us in the basement. Justin paused. You did not scream. Did you, I don't know, see him before? Once. Did he follow you to my house? I'm not sure. I shot Justin's BB gun, missing the target entirely. I handed Justin his gun for his turn. Have you seen him since then? I asked. Maybe. It's like I'd see him standing in the corner of the room, but it's just a shirt hanging up. Justin shivered, recalling this memory. Let's forget about him. David, I tell Justin. That's what I call him. Why David? Why did your mom call you Justin? Justin fired his shot, one ring off from a bullseye. Dunno. I call him David for the same reason your mom calls you Justin. Because, well, that is just how things go. I pause again, lining up my shot. I don't know, I'm just a kid. Shot a bullseye. Not long after this conversation, David would come to see me. Justin was in Minnesota with his grandfather, going on a trip to visit family. It was the first weekend since school started. I wasn't used to the school schedule yet, so I was staying up late watching Adult Swim or whatever was on that late. I ended up falling asleep in my living room. The couch I was sleeping on was under the window that was facing towards the street. The window has curtains, but I left the curtains up after closing the window. I wasn't thinking. The TV was on the other side of the room. If someone wanted, they could watch whatever Adult Swim show was on along with me. But alas, our TV had this automatic turn-off system so that after an hour or so it would turn off. Means the poor street folk couldn't watch our TV without me. I was dreaming. I forget about what. It doesn't matter. But there's this tapping I hear in my dream. Well, I know now that the tapping wasn't in the dream. The room was almost silent. Darkness was overwhelming. My eyes were adjusted to the dim-lit room. The only light being from the moon. I didn't move my body. I was tired. I had my eyes half open and taking in the room around me. About to close them when I fully opened my eyes. I hadn't gotten up yet. I shuffled to get up, but that's when I saw David. His reflection in the black screen TV. I froze. My gaze was locked onto David's reflection. He was grinning. His smile was unnaturally large tonight. His eyes were fixated on me, looking down on me. I was defenseless, afraid, and unable to move. I watched this reflection for hours, literal hours this time. Every 10 or so minutes, counting 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3, starting back at 1 again every time he tapped on the glass. About the second hour in, I had to pee. I ended up pissing my pants. The wet stain in my pants was uncomfortable and it stunk. I know Mom and Dad would be pissed about me pissing on the couch, but I couldn't be bothered with that seemingly pointless thought right now. Right now, I needed to not move. Another hour would go by. 18 window taps an hour, I assumed. 3,600 seconds. The dread I felt was stronger than the need to sleep. Another hour would go by. Then another hour of this painful counting, of this tapping routine. And after another 30 minutes, about 6:30, the man frowns. His expression was angry. The anxiety I felt while watching him leave was immeasurable. Once I was confident he was gone, about 5 minutes later, after he faded from the TV, I ran into my bedroom. I threw off my pajamas and underwear, walk into the room, and pass out on my bed. My dad was furious about the piss. It was about 2 p.m. when I woke up. I would exit my room with a dirty towel around my waist. And while heading towards the shower, my dad would stop me. "Why does my couch smell like pee?" I was ready to tell him, but only after I showered. Could I please go shower first? I can explain it when I'm clean. "Are you hungover? Are you doing drugs? What drugs are you doing?" But I had a mix of fury and concern. I ignored his questions for now. He allowed me to head into the bathroom, seeing how little I was dressed. I would have to explain it. He wouldn't let go of this if I didn't. The water from the shower head felt amazing. I washed away all the sweat and piss sticking to me. To be in a room with no windows for David to peek into gave me relief. I washed everything that day, hair to toes. The water helped wake me up, bringing me out of the drowsy state I was in. I would finish my shower, put clean clothes on, and meet my dad right as I exit the bathroom. I did not know what to tell him. I know I didn't do drugs that day, but what part of the night was believable? An impossibly tall man who had black eyes watched me sleep? I tried to explain what I saw. Thankfully, he half believed me. He believed that there could have been a man at the window last night, but he also had me drug tested. The results came back negative for all drugs they tested for. My parents officially were concerned now. This is the second time, to their knowledge, as I had yet to bring up the basement incident, that I brought up David, this creepy nudist who had a thing for their son. We had no security at the time, nothing to prevent a break-in or any sort of crime from happening. That is when they started to take their jobs more seriously. My mom was hired as a substitute teacher. It helps pay for small luxury things like on-brand food. My dad eventually got promoted. A lot. Even though he did not have a college degree, he took personal time to study how banking and loans work. This study eventually got him a job giving loans to people who want to buy houses and cars and such. It was after one of his many promotions Dad went to buy security cameras. That would be the last I saw of David in my teenage years. I couldn't tell you why. Maybe David has an understanding of modern technology. Maybe he got bored of me. But just because I didn't see him, doesn't mean he had stopped visiting me. However, it was January earlier this year. I'd been looking through old photos. I hadn't thought of David since I was 13 all those years ago. I'm of legal drinking age now. 10 whole years. As of now, me and my girlfriend were planning on moving in together. I was getting boxes filled with stuff I thought I needed, looking through my old stuff. I found some old photos from my teen years. Some were Polaroids. Some were printed from one of those Walmart kiosks. It was nostalgic looking at me and Justin back in those years. There was a photo of the day I first met my girlfriend, and another after I had my first drink. Then there was a photo of the mountain trip me, Justin, and some others had. It was Justin's grandpa who took us and who took the photo. We were 16 at the time. There were 2 other boys, Brandon and Sam. The photo was taken on a Polaroid, but there were 5 figures in the photo. I didn't think much of it until minutes thinking about who all was there. How the fuck did I miss this? The memories of David came back. The snow, the basement, the reflection. There were more photos, some where David was right fucking next to me. The bastard never left me alone. The photos I had went up until my 21st birthday, and checking my phone I had some photos with him just last Christmas. The Christmas was just last month. My girlfriend came into the room, concerned. What's wrong, baby? Look at this photo. It was the photo from the mountain trip. What's up with it? If Doug, Justin's grandpa, took the photo, and Justin, Sam, and Brandon are in the photo with me, who is that? I point to the figure. She was worried. It was written on her face, but she did not say anything before I started showing her all the other photos. One for my birthday, our anniversary, and even one for my grandpa's funeral, Dad's side. I don't know. Her voice was faint compared to her normal volume. What was she supposed to know? Her boyfriend had gone crazy. I look around my room, pushing things around. I break some things as opening the curtains in my room and looking out the window. He was there. His face was almost pressed up to the window, just like last time. I didn't know what to do. My girlfriend shrieked seeing the man there, quickly scurrying out of the room. She called 911, explaining the situation. My mom heard from the living room and came running in. It all happened so fast. Mom pushed me to the side. Bang, 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 bang! 4 shots rang through the house. My mom had bought a pistol, after the financial situation improved, of course, but she never forgot what I said. The experiences I had at 13, she was ready for this day. David gave an animal-like screech, running away. I got up in time to see him disappear into the night. The cops would question the 3 of us, asking my mom to see the security footage. The footage was corrupted, from minutes before I opened my curtain to right after David left. I spent these last few months afraid, not sure what to do next. I would stay inside for long periods of time. I thought she would leave me, but apparently my girlfriend loves me more than I thought, helping me go through these last months. But I've been inside for too long now. I hate having to be taken care of. I need to get my life back in order. I'm going to go around asking about my situation around town, bringing it up to extended family, etc. I hope David had died to the bullets, but just in case, I'm asking if anyone has had a similar experience. Any advice or clues as to what I'm dealing with is appreciated. Who's afraid? So, okay. We need to go through some. We need to cover some stuff here. So I'm going to start with the positives because I think that's usually the best place to kind of start. I like the story. I think the David himself, the creature, weird man person thing, that's a great idea. Kind of weird, kind of really bizarre, freaky, gives off a level of pedophile vibes and shit like that. But I guess he's just kind of a creepy stalker dude. It mainly sounds like he's only really stalking our protagonist. Not entirely sure why, because he follows him for like his entire life. It's quite confusing when you really think about it, because we don't know why. I mean, clearly he's just some kind of a creep, isn't he? That's what I've ultimately gathered from this, because I mean he's watched him essentially his entire life, and nobody saw or caught. I don't know. Okay. The story's it's rough. The story is rough. This is what I would expect for somebody who they like watching scary things, and oh my god, I've seen like 3 scary movies and I think they're amazing, and I don't hate that. I totally understand that, but you can tell there's a lot of grammar problems. There's a lot of like misused words. There's details in random places that don't really have a need. Like this whole the big one for me was probably the fact that they love to mention how the family has great value brand compared to on brand food, which doesn't make sense either because it'd just be branded food. Anyway, the fact is, it's just really weird. But then you also bring up like the family. You kind of give a good level of detail, backstory. A lot of the other people aren't super relevant, but whatever. So it's not really an issue. But I love how early in the story we talk about basically you've got this insanely good memory where you do remember very specific things. Like you literally say, the day you're born. You're talking about the places you lived, the things that happened to you in your youth. You remember the specific first encounter with David, but then you don't really remember all the details about the second encounter with David, and you make it sound like you're this. You make the protagonist sound like they are this incredibly humble and passionate and caring child. Before they even reach the 6th grade, they're like super aware of their life, and there's so many things that just make you feel like this was a fantastic writing exercise that probably gets submitted to school. But yet again, this is a rough draft. This is not final draft material. This is like, you got a lot of story points, you got a lot of good things, you got some interesting details, you've also got things that don't need details, but then you've also got stuff that has no details and just kind of doesn't make any sense, and things get a little all over the place. And it really takes you out of it, because the whole point of this story should be about, obviously, their encounters with David. It should definitely be a fair amount of emphasis about the David thing. I think another one that really kind of confused me a lot is that the fact that this kid who isn't afraid of things, and safe inside their own home, still gets so afraid by David peering at them through the window, right? At night, watching Adult Swim. Oh, you're so hardcore. Irrelevant details, you know. But the fact is, they're so afraid. They're so afraid while they're inside their own home. And at this point, they've had at least 1 or 2 encounters with David, which have not resulted in anything negative or scary. It's very obvious David doesn't have anything on his person to maybe break through a window. And I know some people might be like, oh, he might break it with his fists. And it's like, well, yeah, technically that could happen. But we haven't seen David do anything violent. We aren't aware that he does anything violent, right? So he's creepy as hell, you know? So it's just, you're so afraid of this person, this creature, whatever you want to call him, that you do a weird counting system, and somehow by just recounting Mississippi's, you go for hours. Somehow you're aware that hours have passed so many times based on your weird counting system, and you're so afraid that you decide, you know what, I'm going to piss myself, instead of going to a bathroom or maybe closing the curtains, calling for my parents, maybe grabbing the phone, calling the police, or anything else. If you're watching Adult Swim, right, you clearly have enough level of sense, or we would hope, probably not, that you would be able to react to it in a better way. Now, if you were at a friend's house, okay, that is a bit more scary, because you're in less control, but you're in your own house. You're in your own house. You know where everything is. You know how essentially everything works. It's just silly. It really... And then, sadly, quite a lot of the sentences and the words, it got tricky to read. I don't know. A fair bit of it wound me up. I'm not going to lie. But it's just because it became difficult to read. But, I mean, besides that, I liked this idea of David. I thought that was a good creepy element. It is also weird that, you know, so clearly they've had pictures taken, right? And as they even said, you know, they pick them up either from Polaroids, which you don't get the picture immediately, but it does print out, and after, you know, it's anywhere from like 5 to 20 seconds, you can see what's on the Polaroid. And they've also got ones that they picked up from clearly Walmart kiosks, Walgreens, whatever. But they have so many pictures from their life based, so they've obviously had pictures taken from, let's say, 13 years old up to 21, 22, even apparently 10 years past the legal drinking age, which, if we're assuming this is a U.S. person based on the information we were given, so from like 13 to 30, right? They've obviously had pictures taken, and they keep a hold of them, and yet, for some crazy reason, in these pictures which have been developed, he's like never seen them before. Because how would you have never even recognized, even in one of the pictures, that David was there? Or maybe somebody else. You're telling me nobody else has seen any of these pictures? It'd be different if it was one picture. But they make it sound like there are multiple pictures they go through that David is there. And nobody said anything. Nobody did anything otherwise. and your mom randomly has a pistol at the end and decides to it's one of those where you cherry pick the parts of things that you like the sound of, you try to put them all together in one story and hope it all fucking sticks. But there's the logic goes out the fucking window. It's a real shame. It's a real shame because I like this David creature. I thought it's a really good idea. It's just a shame the rest of the story logic doesn't work. And then also, so they're planning on moving in with their girlfriend, and oh my god, after looking at all these pictures, realizing, oh my god, David, he's been following me my whole life. Oh my god, that's crazy. I can't believe nobody else has even seen that, right? Even not taking the pictures, but clearly if David's been following him basically his entire life, you're telling me nobody else saw that in well over 10 years. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make any sense. It'd be different if he was the only one who could see David. That would at least make more sense. But we know David can be seen by other people, so that still doesn't work. And then when they open the curtains and oh my god, David is there in broad daylight, looking in through the window like he did years and years ago. We're assuming you're still in the same house that this first happened before. And it doesn't make sense because you're telling me that, let's say he's been doing this for, I don't know, even a week. Let's say David's been doing this for only a fucking week. You're telling me none of the neighbors that you have are noticing this naked man with no genitalia is always going up to your windows and just standing there staring. Nobody's called the cops on this dude. There's so many things that just don't make sense. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't want to be super harsh. It really does take you out of any immersion. It does make it hard to digest, and it sucks. It sucks a lot. And I don't want to make you feel bad about it. I don't want to make you feel like this is the worst story ever. I don't think it's that. I don't think it's the worst story ever. Definitely not. Oh god, are you kidding me? I've definitely read some really bad ones. Ones that I might not even cover on this channel bad, right? Like I might do like a whole separate segment kind of thing maybe at one point and just really wind myself up. That'd be kind of funny, I'm sure, but I'd lose my sanity, but do it. Anyway, that's not important. That's not important. Fact is, you had something here, which means you've got the potential. If this is something you want to keep doing, you could do it. It's just a little bit more tidying up and proofreading and things like that, and maybe a level of logic's got to be applied, Just a couple little notes. That's all. That's all I'm saying. But David was a great concept. You're onto something. Very good. This has been Nate at Night. I'm going to shut the fuck up now. Before I leave. Or I just completely lose my voice. Oh, God. Let me know down below what you thought of David. I thought David was a creepy thing. It reminds me of like Cheer Bear, but in like a different kind of a way. Like a different level of creepy, but similar creep factor. If some of you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, we'll see you for whatever's next. Take care.
My fiance's voice was on a disturbing DVD I received 3 days before our wedding. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to post on a forum like this, but I'm desperate. My wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it turned into a nightmare that I'm still running from. Let me start from the beginning. I'm Lily, 28 years old, and I was engaged to James for a little over a year. We met at a charity fundraiser, hit it off immediately, and it had been a whirlwind of a romance ever since. He was charming, successful, and came from a well-respected family in our small town of Oakwood. Everything seemed perfect. Until 3 days before our wedding. I was sorting through the mail, sifting past the usual pile of RSVPs and last-minute wedding cards, when I found a padded envelope with no return address. Curious, I tore it open. Inside was a plain DVD in a clear case, unmarked except for a post-it note that read, "Watch me." Now I know what you're thinking. Who uses DVDs in 2024? My curiosity got the better of me. I popped it into our ancient player, hooked up to our living room TV, left over from when James moved in. The screen flickered to life, and what I saw, God, I wish I could unsee it. It started with a dimly lit forest clearing. The camera was shaky, like someone was filming an old handheld camcorder. Figures in dark robes moved around a bonfire. their faces hidden behind grotesque animal masks. The flames cast eerie shadows, making their movements seem jerky and unnatural. I was about to turn it off, thinking it was some sick prank. Then I heard a voice that made my blood run cold.
Bring forth the sacrifice.
It was James. I'd know his voice anywhere, that slight southern drawl, the way he emphasizes certain words. But this wasn't the warm, loving tone I was used to. This was cold, commanding, almost cruel. The robed figures parted, and two of them dragged forward what looked like a person, bound and struggling. I couldn't make out any details in the flickering firelight, but the muffled scream sent shivers down my spine. I slammed my hand on the power button, my heart racing. What the hell had I just watched? Had it been fake? It had to be fake, right? Some elaborate hoax. With shaking hands, I rewound the video and played that part again and again. Each time, I became more certain that was James's voice. I must have watched it a dozen times before I heard the front door open. James was home. I yanked it out of the DVD player and shoved it into the first hiding spot I could think of, the pocket of my bathrobe hanging on the back of the door.
Lily, you home, sweetheart?
James called out. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. I'm here, I managed to croak out. He walked in, all smiles and warmth, leaning in to kiss me. I flinched away, instinctively.
Everything okay?
He asked, his brow furrowing with concern. I forced a smile. Just wedding jitters, I guess. He laughed, pulling me into a hug.
Cold feet already? Don't worry, it'll all be perfect.
As I stood there, in his embrace, my mind raced. The man holding me seemed nothing like the cold voice on that video, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly, terribly wrong.
Hey,
James said, pulling back to look at me.
you sure you're all right? You look pale.
I nodded, not trusting myself to speak.
Well, I've got a surprise for you.
He grinned.
Remember that necklace you loved at the antique store? I went back and got it for you. Thought it'd be perfect for the wedding.
He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was a delicate silver chain with a pendant, a tiny animal skull, intricately carved. I felt the blood drain from my face. It looked just like the masks in the video.
Don't you like it?
James asked, his smile faltering. It's beautiful, I lied. I'm just overwhelmed. Thank you. As he fastened it around my neck, his fingers brushed my skin. All I could think was, who are you, really? And what have I gotten myself into? I spent most of that night tossing and turning, my mind racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those masked figures dancing around the fire. I kept hearing James's voice, cold and commanding, echoing in my head. The next morning I woke up to an empty bed. There was a note on James's pillow.
Gone for the run. Back soon. Love you.
I don't know what possessed me, but I found myself creeping into his office. I never snooped before. I'd always trusted him completely, but now? Now I felt like I was living with a stranger. His desk was meticulously organized, as always. I started rifling through drawers, not sure what I was looking for. Old bills, work documents, nothing out of the ordinary. Then I opened the bottom drawer. My hands trembled as I lifted out a small wooden box. It was beautifully carved with intricate symbols I couldn't recognize. My heart pounding, I opened it. Inside was a collection of what looked like tiny bones. Animal bones, I hoped. There was a small vial of dark liquid, a lock of hair tied with a red ribbon, and a USB drive. I grabbed the drive and rushed to my laptop. As it loaded, I heard the front door open. James was back.
Lily?
He called out. Just a sec! I shouted back, my voice unnaturally high. The drive finished loading, revealing a single video file. I didn't have time to watch it, so I quickly emailed it to myself and deleted the sent email. Then, thinking quickly, I uploaded it to a secure cloud storage account I rarely used, under a fake name. I had just closed my laptop when James walked in, flushed from his run.
There you are.
He smiled, leaning in to kiss me. I forced myself not to pull away.
What are you up to?
Oh, just confirming some last-minute wedding details, I lied. His eyes narrowed slightly.
In my office?
I was looking for stamps, I said, lamely. For thank you cards. He stared at me for a long moment, then his face relaxed into a smile. There was something off about it, a tightness around his eyes that hadn't been there before.
Well, no need to stop those yet. We've got a lifetime ahead of us for thank you notes.
As he headed to the shower, I let out a shaky breath. Had he bought my lie, or was he just playing along? I spent the rest of the day in a fog, going through motions of last-minute wedding prep. James seemed normal, loving, excited about our big day. But now every smile, every touch felt off, like he was wearing a mask, and I could see the edges where it didn't quite fit. That night, after James fell asleep, I snuck to the living room with my laptop. With shaky hands, I opened the video file from the USB. It started similarly to the DVD. The same forest clearing, the same bonfire, but this time the camera was steady, the image clearer. I could make out more details of the robed figures, their animal masks even more disturbing in high definition. James's voice rang out again.
The time has come. Our sacrifice has been prepared.
The camera panned to show a stone altar. On it lay a person, a woman, struggling against her bonds. Her face was covered, but I could see long, dark hair spilling over the edge of the altar. That hair looked disturbingly like mine. One of the masked figures approached the altar, raising a wicked-looking knife.
With his blood, we seal our pact,
James intoned. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart threatening to burst out of my chest. This couldn't be real. This had to be some elaborate movie prop, right? A sick joke. But deep down, I knew this was real, and I was in danger. I must have made some noise because suddenly James was there in the doorway.
Lily, what are you doing up?
I looked up at him. This man I thought I knew, this man I was supposed to marry tomorrow, and I felt nothing but terror. I couldn't sleep, I managed to say. He came closer, his eyes darting to the closed laptop.
Wedding jitters again? Come on, let's go back to bed. Everything will be better in the morning.
As he led me back to our room, his hand on the small of my back, all I could think was, would I even survive until morning? I lay awake for hours, mind racing. I knew I couldn't go through with the wedding, but I also knew that I couldn't just confront James. Not when I'd seen what he was capable of. I need to run, but how? Where would I go? As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I made a decision. I had to get out, and I had to do it now. I pretended to be asleep as James got up, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he'd heard it. I felt his lips brush my forehead.
See you at the altar, my love,
He whispered before leaving. As soon as I heard his car pull away, I sprang into action. I grabbed a small backpack and started throwing in essentials. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, phone charger. I emptied out my rainy day cash stash, about $500, and shoved it into the bag. I then grabbed my purse, making sure the DVD was still in there. I ran to James's office and retrieved the wooden box from his desk drawer. My hands shook as I opened it, half expecting the bones inside to start rattling on their own. I don't know why I took it. Evidence, I guess? Or maybe I thought it was going to give me some clue about what James was really up to. I was about to leave when I noticed something I'd missed before. A small notebook, tucked under some papers. I flipped it open and felt my blood run cold. It was filled with names and dates. Some were crossed out, others circled. Next to each name was a symbol, the same symbol carved into the wooden box. And there, on the last page, was my name. Next to it was that day's date and a symbol I hadn't seen before, a star inside a circle. I shoved the notebook into my bag along with the box and ran out of the house. I got into my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get my keys into the ignition. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Mrs. Henderson next door giving me a strange look. I realized how odd I must look. The bride, fleeing on her wedding day. I drove to the police station, my mind racing. This was it. I was going to expose everything. But as I sat in the parking lot, doubt crept in. What exactly was I going to tell them? That my fiancé was part of some weird cult? That I found some creepy videos in a box of bones? It all seemed so unbelievable. And then there was his family to consider. The Blackwoods practically owned this town. James's father was a judge and his uncle the chief of police. Who would believe me over them? Before I could change my mind, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my maid of honor asking where I was. The reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. I had a whole wedding party waiting for me. Dozens of guests would be arriving soon. In a panic, I made a decision that would haunt me for months to come. I drove to the Oakwood Inn, where the wedding was to be held. As soon as I walked in, I was swept up in a whirlwind of activity. Hair, makeup, getting into my dress. My bridesmaids chattered excitedly around me, but their voices sounded distant, like I was underwater.
Lily, Eartha Lily.
My maid of honor, Sarah, was waving her hand in front of my face.
You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost.
I forced a smile. Nervous, I guess. She squeezed my hands.
Cold feet are normal, but trust me, once you see James waiting for you at the end of that aisle, all your doubts will melt away.
If only she knew. As I stood there in the bridal suite, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest, I made a decision. I was going to face this head on. No more running, no more hiding. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and opened the door. My dad was waiting to walk me down the aisle, his eyes misty with pride. If only he knew. The wedding march began, and we started our walk. The church was packed, every eye on me. But I only saw James, standing at the altar, looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo. But for a moment, my resolve wavered. How could this man who looked at me with such love be involved in something so sinister? As I reached the altar, James took my hand, his touch sending conflicting waves of comfort and terror through me. The officiant began the ceremony, his words washing over me in a blur.
If anyone could show just 'cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace.
This was it. My last chance. I cleared my throat. I have something to say. A collective gasp went through the church. James's hand tightened on mine, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and... was that fear?
Lily,
He whispered, his voice tight.
what are you doing?
I turned to face the congregation, my voice shaking but growing stronger with each word. I'm sorry, but I can't go through with this wedding, not until I get some answers. I pulled out my phone and the DVD from my bouquet. James, you need to explain this. Now. His face went pale as he recognized the DVD.
Where did you get that?
He hissed, his charming facade cracking. It doesn't matter, I said, my voice carrying through the now silent church. What matters is what's on it. A ritual in the woods, people in masks, your voice, talking about sacrifices. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw James's parents exchanged a worried glance.
Lily, please.
James said, reaching for me, his eyes darting nervously around the room.
This isn't the time or place.
I stepped back. No more secrets, no more lies. You tell me the truth, James. What are you involved in? For a moment, he just stared at me, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Then, to my shock, he started to laugh. It wasn't a joyful sound, but hollow and tinged with bitterness.
Oh, Lily,
He said, shaking his head.
you weren't supposed to find out. Not like this. Not yet.
He turned to face the congregation, his posture changing, becoming more commanding.
I suppose the cat's out of the bag now. Sorry, folks, but this wedding's gonna be a little different than planned.
To my horror, several people in the pews stood up. They reached into their jackets and pulled out those terrifying animal masks that I'd seen in the video. What's going on? I demanded, my voice rising with the panic. James, what is this? He turned back to me, his eyes cold now, all pretense of love gone.
It's our legacy, Lily. Our birthright. The Blackwood family has been the guardians of this town for generations. We keep the balance, make the hard choices so others don't have to.
Guardians? Hard choices? You're talking about human sacrifice. He winced.
It's more complicated than that. The rituals, they protect the town. Keep evil at bay. Without them, this place would fall into chaos and ruin.
I shook my head, unable to believe what I was hearing. This is insane! You're all insane!
I know it sounds crazy.
James said, taking a step toward me, his voice low and urgent.
But I love you, Lily. I chose you not just as my wife, but as my partner in this. You're strong enough to bear this burden with me.
bear this burden? James, you're talking about murder.
No!
A new voice rang out. A new voice rang out. I turned to see James's father standing up, his face grave.
Not murder. Sacrifice. There's a difference.
More people were standing now, donning masks. I looked around wildly, realizing with growing horror that at least half of the guests were in on this. The woman in the video, I said, a terrible thought occurring to me. The one at the altar. Was that supposed to be me? James's composure cracked completely. His eyes darted around nervously, and sweat beaded on his forehead.
No, that was a rehearsal of sorts, to prepare you for your role.
My role? As what, some kind of ritualistic murderer?
As a protector.
He insisted, his voice rising with desperation.
Lily, please, just listen. Let me explain everything. You'll understand.
For a moment I wavered. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted there to be some explanation that would make all of this okay. But then I remembered the terror in that woman's eyes, the cold command in James's voice. Whatever this was, it wasn't right. I took a step back. No, I don't want to understand. I want no part of this. I turned to run, but found my path blocked by masked figures. They were closing in from all sides, their animal masks grotesque in the church's dim light.
I'm sorry, Lily.
James said from behind me, his voice cold again.
But you don't have a choice. Once you're part of this, you're part of it for life.
I felt a hand grip my arm, and the panic surged through me. Without thinking, I lashed out, my elbow connecting with someone's face. There was a cry of pain, and suddenly, chaos erupted. Guests were screaming, some running for the exits, while others, the masked ones, tried to grab me. I saw my parents being held back by men in suits, confusion and terror on their faces.
Get her!
James shouted, his voice cracking with panic.
Don't let her leave!
I ducked under grasping hands, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I caught a glimpse of Sarah, my maid of honor, her eyes wide with shock. Run! I screamed at her. Get out of here! I made it to the church doors, shoving them open with all of my strength. Outside, I hear sirens in the distance. For a moment, relief washed over me. The police were coming. But then I remembered. James's uncle was the chief of police. They weren't coming to help me. My wedding dress caught on something as I fled, tearing a long strip from the hem. That I didn't care. I just ran, my bare feet pounding against the pavement, my lungs burning. I could hear shouts from behind me, and I didn't dare look back. I found myself in the parking lot, surrounded by rows of cars. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm me. I didn't have my keys. Then I spotted Sarah's car. She always kept a spare key hidden in the wheel well. My shaking hands found it, and seconds later, I was peeling out of the lot, tires screeching. In my rearview mirror, I saw James and several masked figures burst out of the church. James's face was contorted with rage, a far cry from the loving man I thought I knew. He pointed to my retreating car, shouting something I couldn't hear. I drove like a madwoman, weaving through traffic and blowing through red lights. Every set of highlights in my rearview mirror sent a jolt of fear through me. Were they following me? How far did their influence reach? It wasn't until I crossed the state line that I finally allowed myself to breathe. I pulled into a rundown motel, paid cash for a room, and collapsed on the bed, still in my torn wedding dress. As the adrenaline wore off, the reality of what happened began to sink in. My entire life just imploded. The man I loved, the future I planned, it was all a lie. And now I was a fugitive running from a cult that had infiltrated every level of my hometown society. I curled up on the bed, violent sobs racking my body. The events of the day played on repeat in my mind. James's cold laughter, the grotesque masks, the terror on my parents' faces. What had happened to them? Were they safe? Or had the cult done something to them? Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and full of nightmares. I dreamed of masked figures chasing me through endless dark forests, of James standing over me with a knife, of altars stained with blood. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. For a moment I didn't know where I was, and then it all came flooding back to me, and I ran to the bathroom to throw up. I spent a few days in a daze, barely leaving the motel room. I survived on vending machine snacks and cheap coffee, jumping at every sound outside my door. I knew I couldn't stay there forever, but I had no idea where to go or what to do next. On the third day, I finally woke up the courage to check the news on my phone. There was nothing about a wedding gone wrong, no reports of a missing bride. It was as if nothing happened. The Blackwoods must have covered it all up. That's when I knew I couldn't just run and hide. They would find me eventually, and even if they didn't, how many other innocent people would suffer because of their rituals? I had to do something. I had to expose them. But how? I had no proof beyond the DVD and the contents of the wooden box, which I had left behind in my panic. My word against theirs wouldn't be enough, not when they controlled the town. That's when I remembered. I emailed myself the video from the USB and uploaded it to the cloud storage account. With shaking hands, I logged into my email from my phone, and the message was still there, unopened. I downloaded the file and watched it again, forcing myself to look at any details that might help me identify the location or the people involved. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I began researching, digging into the history of Oakwood and the Blackwood family. I reached out to investigative journalists, to podcasters who specialized in exposing cults. Most ignored me. A few responded, intrigued but skeptical. One journalist, a woman named Elena, seemed particularly interested. We arranged a meeting at a coffee shop in a nearby city. As I sat waiting for her, my nerves were on edge. Every person who walked in made me flinch. Was that James? Did that woman's bag look like it could be hiding a mask? Elena turned out to be a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to my story without interruption, her face growing more serious with each detail. "I believe you," she said when I finished. "I've heard whispers about the Blackwoods before, but never anything this concrete. This is big, Lily, really big." For the first time since my wedding day, I felt a glimmer of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by Elena's next words. "But we need to be careful. If what you're saying is true, these people are powerful and dangerous. We need more evidence before we can go public with this." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. "So what do we do now?" Elena leaned forward, her voice low. "We dig deeper. I have some contacts that might be able to help, but Lily, you need to understand, this could take time, and it could be dangerous." As if to emphasize her point, at that moment, a man in a dark suit walked into the coffee shop. He looked around casually, but something about him made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Elena must have noticed my reaction. "Go," she said quietly. "Use the back door. I'll be in touch." I slipped out of the coffee shop, my heart pounding. As I walked briskly down the street, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. For months, I moved from town to town, always looking over my shoulder, never staying in one place for too long. I worked odd jobs for cash, using public libraries to continue my research. Slowly, with Elena's help, I began to piece together a picture of how deep the Blackwoods' influence ran. There were whispers of other towns, other families like the Blackwoods, a network of guardians stretching across the country, maybe even beyond. The more I uncovered, the more terrified and determined I became. But the constant fear and stress were taking their toll. I lost weight, dark circles formed under my eyes. I jumped at every unexpected sound, flinched at every touch. Sleep became a luxury, always interrupted by vivid nightmares of masked figures and blood-stained altars. One night, in yet another anonymous motel room, I woke up screaming, convinced I'd seen James standing at the foot of my bed. It took me hours to convince myself it had been a dream. I'm writing this now from another motel room, my hands shaking as I type. I don't know if they're still looking for me. I don't know if I'll ever be able to go home. But I do know that I can't stop until the truth comes out. To anyone reading this, be careful. Evil doesn't always look like you expect it to. Sometimes it wears a charming smile and offers you a diamond ring. Sometimes it hides behind respectability and tradition. And if you are ever invited to a wedding in a small town called Oakwood, run. Run as fast and as far as you can. Because trust me, some vows are better left unspoken. I don't know what will happen next, but I do know one thing. I'm going to bring them down. Somehow, some way, I'm going to expose the Blackwood family and their twisted rituals. And maybe, Just maybe I'll find a way to save the next bride they try to recruit. If you have any information that might help, or if you've been experiencing something similar, please reach out. Be careful. They're watching. They're always watching. And to James, if you're reading this, I loved you. I really did. But I never, ever want to be a part of your legacy. You chose the wrong bride to sacrifice. Update. For those asking, yes, I've managed to contact some friends and family. Sarah, whose car I took, is safe. She got out during the chaos. Others I'm not sure. Some act like nothing happened. Others have vanished. I don't know if they're threatened, recruited, or worse. I moved again. Kept seeing a black SUV outside of my motel, and one night I saw someone in an animal mask watching my room. Paranoia? Maybe, but I'm not risking it. The journalist, Elena, and I are making progress. We found financial records hinting at a network of families like the Blackwoods and other towns. It's not enough yet, but we're getting there. Oakwood seems fine so far. No catastrophes. Did they find another sacrifice, or it was all just for power? I don't know. I'm exhausted, scared, and some days it's hard to keep going. But I think of the potential victims out there, and I know I can't stop.
And that was My Fiance's Voice Was on a Disturbing DVD I received 3 days before our wedding by Prodsebi. I'm just never going to get these names right. I'm so sorry. Who also wrote I Got Stuck in a Time Loop in My High Rise, if you remember that one. So this one I feel is a little bit, it makes a little bit more sense, right? It's this really interesting story where this lady who's about to marry love of her life kind of a situation uncovers dark truths about him and creepy rituals and everything like that. And it turns out it's like the whole town is basically in on it, or at least the majority of the town, based on like their family status and everything. It's a story that we've kind of heard before in other little like mainly films and TV shows and even storybooks, for example. But I like it. I do. I think it's a good simple plot. Cult activity going on. They're trying to do these things in order to keep the town safe. It's like a whole protection thing. It's classic. It's classic. It's good. Are they 100% true with what they're saying? Well, obviously, you don't know. Because we don't see anything bad happen if they don't sacrifice anybody. We have no evidence or proof about that, which is fine. You know, I think no matter what, this story is a good one. I've always enjoyed creepy cult kind of stuff going on. That's always just been a pleasantry kind of thing. It makes me think of like Alan Wake 2, for example. It's just nice. It's just nice. Well, I mean, not nice, but you know, it's a good simple thing you can go along with. And yeah, I wouldn't say it was anything too bad really about this. I found the story to be quite enjoyable because it was mainly from the Lily's perspective. I thought it would be a great opportunity to let Jenny narrate a full story. And I know she had a lot of fun doing it, and I'm really proud of her for doing that. So thank you so much, Jenny, for that. That was really cool. I thought you did a really good job. We'll see what the people down below think, but be fucking nice. That's okay. So yeah, and I got to play obviously the creepy fiance, which I thought was quite fun, being a little bit of a southern drawl kind of a man. I thought that was kind of fun. Yeah, I feel pretty good about this story. Pretty good indeed. Well done. Well done, Prochebi. Excited to see what else you're going to come up with. Well, I've been Nate at Night. This has been yet another cool story down. Let me know what you think down below. Let me know what else you want to see next. I'm probably going to be starting, I don't know if I'm going to call it a series. I might not. Depends on how much content I can find. Where I kind of read bad stories. But I'm not talking like meh stories. I'm talking like the really painful bad stories. I think that'd be very fun to kind of see how much of it I can deal with before, like, totally losing my shit. I think that'd be very funny. So if there's anything that you believe is super bad, I mean, it could be a scary story, it could be a fan fiction, I don't really care. As long as I have permission to read those things, I'd be happy to do it. Let me know what you think. Let me know what I should be covering. Let me know what you want me to do. We will see you next time. Bye. My dad disappeared 11 years ago. I think I know why. My dad was, and still is, my hero. I'm sure it sounds like just another worn-out cliche, and hell, it might be. But it is very important to me that you remember this piece of information because, otherwise, all the things that I'm going to tell you about, all the actions I've taken, will make me seem like a total lunatic. He was an anthropologist by trade, and you could tell from the moment you met him. Even as young as I was, I knew that my dad loved people. He was fascinated by them, and he adored everything about them. It was woven into the dorky Hawaiian dad shirts he wore when he threw spontaneous backyard barbecues, tucked into his palm as he enthusiastically shook hands with every barista and bank teller he met, and etched into the crinkles of his eyes as he let out another boisterous laugh, the sort of laugh that made everyone else in the area want to laugh with him. People, it seems, loved him too. He wrote a lot of books, and apparently his personality shone even in writing because they sold incredibly well. It was after the smashing success of one book in particular, one discussing folk legends in our home state of Colorado, that he decided we would buy the vacation home. God, it seems bitterly ironic looking back on it now. But we'll get to that. The vacation home was in a tiny Welsh town called Arfordir. It was, as the Welsh name suggests, on the sea, and the town lined a semicircular divot in the country's coastline, flanked on either side by craggy cliffs. Only a short distance out from the beach, approximately where the center of the circle would be if it were completed, there was a tiny island. It was scarcely more than a large rock, harboring little besides a couple of small grottos and a smattering of gulls' nests. It was called Morgan's Isle. I only ever got to spend a couple of summers at the house, but I remember those summers very fondly. My dad was deeply interested in the area, not only because of his appreciation for Welsh culture, or what little remained after the gentrification of the area, but also because of some of the town's more unique attractions. Two in particular stand out to me as I reflect on it, and both involved the island. If you were outside at night, or when a dense fog had blanketed the town, you could hear a low, haunting melody rolling in off the sea. It was like someone playing the flute, resonant and mournful, far away across the water. My dad thought that it was the wind, catching in the cracks and crevices of Morgan's Isle and flowing back out across the water, friction from the sea-soaked rocks producing the ghostly howl. During the day, he said, the sounds of the town drowned it out. But at night we would sit together on the back porch of the house and listen to the island sing across the inky sea. From our porch, it was also possible to observe the other phenomena. If you looked out towards the island on a clear night, it was possible to see small, glittering points of light drifting over the dark water. They typically appeared in pairs, and they seemed to dip and swell as if riding atop the waves. My dad thought it was a trick of the moonlight, perhaps an unusual reflection from something on the island or the shore. And he thought they were beautiful, like diamonds drifting on the sea, he said. And I looked up at him, stars in my eyes, and agreed. I was only 9 when he disappeared. He had decided that he was going to go out fishing for the day. We had a small boat, and we went out on it pretty frequently, leaving in the mid-morning and not returning until the last streaks of sunlight were slipping from the sky. Usually he would let me come with, and I begged to go that day too, but he wouldn't let me. I'm still not sure why. Maybe I had been particularly clingy for the days preceding, or maybe he was planning to go out and do something dangerous that morning. I don't know. But I do know that as darkness fell that evening, he didn't come back, and he never did again. They found the boat, bashed up against the cliffs a few miles down the coast from Arfordir, but no sign of Dad. While accidents like this were uncommon in the area, they were not unheard of, and it was ultimately written off as an accidental drowning. They trawled the area for a while, looking for his body, but nothing turned up. And after the worst plane ride of our lives, my mom and I had to bury an empty casket. We didn't go back to the vacation home after that. We were alright financially, as my dad had left us a sizable chunk of savings to supplement my mom's income, but we couldn't face going back to where it had all happened. At the same time, though, my mom couldn't bear to get rid of the place, and so it sat, falling into disrepair, for 11 years. Until a few days ago. I recently turned 20, and after having something of an early life crisis, decided it was time to get some closure. My mom was not a big fan of my decision. If it was up to her, we would just let the house rot to nothing, and never think about it again. But I had made up my mind, and before she could mount any real effort to stop me, I was bound for Cardiff Airport. I opted to check into Arfordir's small inns rather than attempting to stay in the house. This turned out to be a smart decision, as when I arrived at our old vacation home, it was in a state of severe disrepair. Being so close to the sea, weathering had taken its toll on the home's exterior, and the once well-kept garden had turned into a tangle of unkempt grass and thorny weeds. The interior was largely preserved, save for one room which had flooded through a hole in the roof, but a thick layer of dust had settled over what little furnishings had remained when we'd vacated the place. Evening was fast approaching, and I decided that it would be best if I returned to the inn to decide what to do with the place. As I was pushing through the door, I turned back one last time, half expecting to see my dad sitting on the stairs behind me. But no one was there. After a restless night, I decided to spend the next day, yesterday, out on the water. I bought some supplies from a dingy little tackle shop and slid into a rented boat in the harbor. As I tugged out into the sea, I had this eerie feeling that I was reliving my dad's last day. Peering across the glittering waves, my eyes snagged on a narrow cave tucked into the jagged flank of Morgan's Isle. I started steering towards it for a moment, but stopped myself. What was I doing? I'd seen people try to approach the cave before, and a patrol boat would always stop you, saying that it wasn't safe for public access. Liable to collapse, they'd say. A tiny part of my brain whispered that they probably hadn't checked there, all those years ago. They would have thought that it was too dangerous, not worth the risk of searching. Maybe. Just maybe. No. I shook my head as if to knock the idiotic thoughts out of my brain. I was there to get closure, not to open some silly, dangerous, and likely fruitless investigation. I found myself a good spot a little ways past the island instead, and settled in for a day of fishing. I didn't end up catching anything. We'd never caught much when I was younger anyway, and the years between had taken their toll on the already dwindling fish population. Besides, I could never quite completely wipe the thoughts of the cave from my mind. Before I knew it, the long, uneasy afternoon had slipped away into evening, and darkness spread quickly across the sky like a stain. As I rounded the island, I could see no other silhouettes against the shimmering lights of the town. I was alone on the water, and I was so close to the cave. I dragged my palms down my face. I knew I wouldn't get a wink of sleep if I didn't at least check. And besides, now was the perfect opportunity, with no patrol boats crawling around. Hidden by the darkness of the open sea, I anchored the boat as close as I could to the tiny, rocky beach at the cave's mouth, and splashed my way to the entrance, wincing as the icy water soaked into my sneakers. Standing on the gravel beach, I fumbled in my pocket. I was relieved to feel the clink of my key ring against my fingertips. Pulling it out, I pressed the button on the small flashlight that I kept clipped to the ring, and its weak beam cut through the darkness ahead of me. The small comfort that the light afforded me was dashed as I heard scuffling from behind some large stones just a few feet ahead. My hand shook as I pointed the flashlight toward the source of the sound, and I stumbled back as a figure moved from behind the rocks. Dad? It had come out as a question, but as my disbelieving eyes flickered over the man in front of me, I was sure it was him. He was much older, and far scruffier than he was when I'd last seen him, and he was still somewhat obscured by the shadows of the cave entrance. Still, I felt certain. It was my dad. My heart leapt in elation, and I stumbled forward, slipping on the loose, wet gravel in my haste to embrace him. To my dismay, however, he started backwards, jerking out of the way of my open arms and slipping backwards, further into the cave. "There's no time, Carter." His voice was rough and strangled with disuse. "What?" He jerked his head backwards, indicating for me to follow him into the cave. I was so stunned by the strangeness of the interaction, by his sudden appearance and by his form retreating further into the darkness of the cave, that I followed without question. At that moment, it seemed like the only thing I could do. While his strides seemed quick and practiced, mine were rendered unsteady by the slick rock beneath me. He was still just ahead of me, just on the edge of my flashlight beam, but I had to pick up my halted, slippery pace to keep up with him as he continued to press on. "There's no time for reunions yet. I promise you, all of that will come in due time. But for now, I just need you to trust me." I was out of breath from our rapid pace, and though questions burned at the tip of my tongue, I wasn't able to vocalize them. The walls of the cave seemed slightly closer now, and my claustrophobia built into a lump in my throat, further blocking any attempt at communication I might make. "Years ago, the day I disappeared, I discovered a ritual site in the back of this cave," he explained as I staggered onward. "I don't remember what happened between then and 2 days ago. All I know is that I woke up here, with the ritual site glowing around me. I managed to find out the date from a passing boat. I don't know what happened, Carter, and I'm so sorry for leaving it for so long. But I do know that something is happening tonight, in this cave. I don't know what will happen if we don't stop it, but I don't want to find out, and I need your help." My head was spinning with all the new information. He was still moving quickly in front of me, and stunned as I was, I lost my focus for a moment, and with it, my footing. My toe caught a small ledge on the ground beneath me, and I tripped, halting for a moment as I caught myself on my hands, scraping myself badly. However, it was not the pain that I noticed. The moment I had stopped, so had my dad. I stood, slowly, and took another step forward. So did he. I took a few more, and he followed. But each time I stopped, he would too. It was as though he was determined to stay exactly as far from me as he was currently. Just close enough to still be visible, just far enough to avoid the full power of my feeble flashlight beam. My blood ran cold. "Carter, come on," he said gruffly, urgency and something else that I now know to have been hunger distorting his tone. "We have to hurry." That had been the point all along, hadn't it? To hurry me along, feed me lots of information all at once, give me no time to think. But now I was thinking. It was a plausible story, sure. My dad had been a curious man, and if he had seen the same opportunity I had, it was certainly possible that he would have tried to explore the cave as well. An anthropologist would have been intrigued by a perceived ritual site, and if something supernatural had indeed happened, it could explain his disappearance in the manner that he described. But something still bugged me. As I mentioned, my dad had always loved people. Now the first person he's seen in 11 years, even if those 11 years were a timeless blur, arrives at the cave and he spends no time greeting them. Not even when that person is his own son. It didn't seem right. I tensed my hand around my keychain and in one smooth motion moved forward and focused the pale beam right on the figure in front of me. He jolted backward as quickly as he could, but it wasn't fast enough. Not this time. And I finally saw him for what he was. Sure, he looked a lot like my dad. An aged up, banged up version of him, tailor-made to look as if he'd been unconscious in a cave for 11 years. An excellent copy. But I could also see why he'd been avoiding the light. In the detail afforded by the dim light, I could see the way his limbs seemed slightly too long, the way his shoulders didn't quite slot in their sockets, the way his teeth seemed just a bit too large for his mouth. And his eyes. Christ. They were the same color as my dad's, sure. But that is where the resemblance ended. They were empty, glassy, artificial, like the false eyes they stick in taxidermied animals. A poor imitation of the real thing. My dad was an anthropologist, and I know a person when I see one. This wasn't. The next few minutes were a blur in my memory. I remember sprinting back in the direction I'd come, slipping and sliding on the algae-coated stone beneath me. I could hear him chasing me. And worse, I could hear more of them behind him, scampering through the cave on what sounded to me like wet, slippery, clawed hands and feet. As I ran, I kicked rocks backwards, hoping they would slow the creature's progress. I guess it must have worked, because the next thing I knew, I'd flung myself into my boat and gunned it away from the island, not even bothering to look back and see how close an escape it had been. This brings me to today. As you might expect, I didn't sleep a wink. I spent the whole night researching, trying to figure out exactly what it was that happened to me. From what I've put together, it is likely that the first part of the story I was told was true. My dad probably did see the cave, seek the opportunity to explore it under the cover of darkness, and venture deep into it, hoping to discover a hidden anthropological treasure. But I don't think he found anything human in that horrible place. And I'm certain now, even more than I was, that he is dead. Do you know where the name Morgan's Isle comes from? I certainly didn't, before my midnight research session. I'd always assumed that it was just named after an important figure in the area, like Jacksonville or Pennsylvania in the US. It turns out, though, that this is not the case. I doubt that many of the current residents of Arfeder would pick up on the name's significance. Hardly any of them are Welsh, and fewer still are old enough or rooted enough in the area to remember any of the legends attached to it. As it turns out, a Morgan, or Morgan, is a Welsh term for a creature that entices men into its lair, usually with its beauty or enchanting voice, in order to drown or consume them. In the US, we might refer to this creature as a siren. I believe that it is likely these creatures that I encountered in the cave last night, and if this is the case, there is no doubt in my mind that they are responsible for the disappearance of a number of visitors and locals alike over the years, including my poor father. As I'm typing this, I'm sitting on the back porch of the old vacation home. My flight leaves tomorrow morning, and I have one more night in the grubby little inn up the road. But something called me back here, telling me to look out over the darkened sea one last time. I sincerely hope that it wasn't the sound that brought me here. That beautiful, achingly sorrowful timbre that echoes up the bluffs and draws me closer, sounding so much more melodic than it did all those years ago. Leaning in, I could see the flecks of light on the water again, tipping hypnotically up and down as waves roll by beneath them. I feel sick to my stomach. My dad was wrong. They aren't anything like diamonds. Looking at them now, I can see them for what they are. Fake, dead, empty, like taxidermy. And that was My Dad Disappeared 11 Years Ago. I Think I Know Why, by probably Piscine? I apologize. It's that second word has confused the crap out of me. So I like this because it's got a little bit of like Welsh folklore to it, which is weirdly not a super common kind of thing that you always hear about, even being English. You don't hear an awful lot about like Welsh mythology and folklore. So in some cases, you learn a fair bit about their mythology, but not so much like the folklore. But like for example, they talk about the Morgan or the Morgan, however you want to pronounce it. And I didn't really know that was kind of a thing, but yet again, it's just akin to like a siren, except in some cases they're a bit more of a shapeshifter, whereas a lot of sirens they don't really change shape. They just kind of stay in this beautiful woman kind of a form and sink ships that way and bring men to their drowning death. So it's a similar thing when it comes to that, but in this case, the fact they're in a cave, unless that cave has some kind of like deep water part inside the cave, I don't know if they're drowning them in there. I guess they're still luring them to their death, with just trickery, basically, isn't it? So clearly that's still at play. But they could be drowning them. Not entirely sure. We didn't obviously get that established fully, but done. So neither here nor there. The fact is, it's something that tricks people and lures them to their death, which is it's cool. It's cool to know that they call them Morgans. I found that to be quite fascinating. I like this story though because you got an anthropologist, obviously a very curious person as usual. They're very interested in how humanity works pretty much everywhere, which is great. I mean, Ligeia is a fantastic example of that. Always very curious about so many different things, learns so much from other people. It's great. It's such a cool thing. And so yet again, I could totally believe why he would be interested in checking out something kind of spooky. Maybe something kind of drew him in there. We're not entirely sure exactly what happened, but yet again, if you're curious and you have the capability to, you would want to check something out. So it tracks. It totally tracks. I like the fact that it didn't get too off the rails. Nothing too insane happened or totally unbelievable. It was fairly believable story. There was no crazy, amazing saving or, oh my god, I know everything. It didn't feel like this was a story that was like too full of itself. It was a good story where you feel like the people are relatable. The story makes sense. I mean, maybe not 100%, but enough. It makes sense enough that you're still kind of invested in it. You know what I mean? And no, I quite enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it, and I learned something new that Morgan's just another kind of a siren. It's great. I always like learning a little bit more about other cultures and things like that. I think it's great. I've been Nate at Night. I've really enjoyed myself, and I sure hope you have too. We will see you for whatever's next. Take care. Hey everybody, Nate at Night here. So we're doing something a little different. Now we're still reading a story, but this is I'm kind of planning on starting some kind of a little series sequence thing, if you will, where I'm reading not great stories. I mean, and before you say, we've already done that. No. We've read stories that were maybe acceptable, a little rough around the edges, nothing too bad. But I plan on covering really bad stuff, right? And really like having a hard time finishing them kind of bad, Obviously, probably tearing them apart, stuff like that, just for funsies and hopefully to make you guys entertained and laugh, because ultimately I want to give you guys things I think you'd enjoy, whether it be because it's funny or because it's spooky, because it's got my take on it, whatever. But today we kind of have a starting point for that. This one is it's interesting. So I was recently sent an email about some absurd horror stories to check out, and I've been given full permission to read them, review them, be as honest as I want, everything. I wanted to totally make sure, just in case, because in some of my past interactions, people don't want me to be super critical, which is fine, totally understand. But I think this is kind of a great opportunity because these stories are, well, I mean, as they put it, absurd. And absurd is a great word for it. So let's go ahead and dive in, and I'll kind of tell you what I'm talking about. So this one that immediately jumped out to me because of the name alone is called the Bathtub Man, which is it's a little weird, definitely absurd, a little, I don't know if I'd say creepy. I don't know if creepy is the right word. Absurd. Absurd is good. I like that word for this. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and we're basically, I'm going to be reading the story, and we'll kind of just react in real time and discuss and break stuff down. And we'll see how I do. We'll see how I do. But you get to see the face this time. You get to see me do it live because it's not a long story. So if it was a long story, that'd be difficult. But we'll see how you like the format. And we'll see how we do. Okay, so the Bathtub Man. We just wanted to have some fun, and so we entered the mansion where the Bathtub Man belongs. Pretty weird. The house is completely derelict, and it was completely empty. Now, how do you know he's there? We shouted out for the Bathtub Man, but we all got nothing. Well, you just said it was completely derelict and empty. Like, of course you wouldn't expect a response. Could be a supernatural entity? I don't know. Let's see. Then my friend started to sweat, even though it was freezing. Okay. Kind of ghost-like-y. Interesting. Then we could hear someone showering and whistling a tune inside a bathtub. How do you know they're inside a bathtub? I can understand the shower. You know what a shower sounds like. Whistling a tune. How do you know they're in a bathtub? In one of the rooms, we could see a floating bathtub. A floating bathtub. And someone was showering inside it. Now, that's interesting because there are some bathtubs that sometimes are called floating bathtubs, if I remember, the ones that you usually have like the claw feet and everything. Those are kind of floating, quote unquote. But I think in this case, they're talking about an actual like floating off the ground bathtub. There were no pipes connected to the bathtub, but there were still water going through it. Grammatically rough. Then the person showering inside the bathtub, he could smell body odor. Now, I'd imagine most people could smell body odor, right? Unless, obviously, you have a difficult time, like, smelling things. Or maybe, I suppose it also depends on how pungent the body odors are. But, maybe that's his trigger, maybe that's his thing. Just weird, just strange. Anyway. Then the other souls inside the floating bathtub. Where did that come from? Which the shower man had caught and imprisoned to shower with him for eternity, had all pointed towards my friend. So the bathtub man, who is actually currently a shower man, but inside a bathtub, so still counts, catches people's souls, imprison them to shower with him for eternity. So we're understanding some weird rules here. I've never heard about an entity like this. So probably completely made up, which is fine. It's so all these people, souls, forced to shower with him. Clothed, not clothed, I don't really know. I don't really want to know. They're all pointing towards his friend. Okay. My friend was freezing, and he was sure that it wasn't his sweat, but someone else's sweat. So we're still talking about how he's sweating even though he's freezing. It's got to the bathtub man's sweat. It's got to the is probably meaning it's got to be the bathtub man's sweat, as his sweats don't come off him but off other people. Now that alone sucks. Can you imagine, like, I mean, I know there are actually, surprisingly, some people out there who their sweat glands don't really work the same as everybody else's. Mine work. Mine absolutely work. It can be incredibly annoying when, all of a sudden I just start sweating, especially from the armpits. Well, not usually from the armpits, but, mainly from the face and stuff like that. But, to imagine that somebody else's sweat, instead of it coming out of their pores, it comes out of your pores, so you start sweating for somebody else. Oh, I hate that. The shower man looked at my friend and said, "My sweats are coming out of your body." It doesn't. And his bathtub turned towards my friend. So okay. The shower man controlled the bathtub to chase after my friend. Controlled it like a car? Like a creature? I'm not going to question too much yet. We all started running inside this mansion, and the shower man inside the bathtub kept singing, "I'm going to catch you, sweaty," he said to my friend. You don't need the he said to my friend when you've got the singing. You've still got the action word aloud. Ugh. But he can't chase you everywhere, right? Because bathtubs are big. But I guess it floats. But that doesn't mean it can squeeze through doorways. Not every doorway anyway. Just find a closet or just get out the mansion, right? It was a sight to see. To see a man inside a floating bathtub which can chase people. That's a true statement. Absolutely. That would be a sight to see. Horrific for sure. Water was flowing through it without any pipework. God knows how that's doing. All the doors to get out of the mansion seemed to have disappeared. Okay. So there's a level of logic going on too. I like it. We were stuck in the perimeters of the household. Yeah, that sucks. Be chased by a singing bathtub man who sweats through. Oh, God, that alone is just horrific. The bathtub man chased us around with the floating bathtub, while he was also showering. It was a weird sight to see. Absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely. Then we were becoming desperate, and my friend who was sweating out the bathtub man's sweat, and not in his own, he was becoming so scared. I would be too if somebody was sweating through me. I would be pretty freaked out. He didn't want to be part of the trapped souls that have to forever shower with the bathtub. Yeah, fuck that. Fuck that. Forever showering, especially with other people. How many souls are in this bathtub? Like, do they all take up typical people space, or are they much smaller now? Like, I don't even want to think about it. The idea is shitty. You're gonna go through so much soap and stuff, man? Like, come on. I had to make the decision to give my friend to the bathtub man. Shame on you. I allowed the bathtub to enter our room, which I had unlocked. So he didn't even reach you. You chose to do this. And with this floating bathtub and showering at the same time, you don't need that. That's okay. He sprayed water at my friend. Is that how he catches people? He sprays his water at you? Okay. Oh, God. I still wouldn't want to be caught, but like that's just funny. My friend then became part of the many souls trapped in the floating bathtub to shower with the bathtub man forever. But he let you go. I was finally able to go home, and as I jumped into my own bathtub to have a shower, I realized it's not my bathtub, but someone else's. Oh, you're a terrible friend. Also, what was the logic here? Because clearly he has multiple souls. Clearly he wants more souls. Why would he just take one of you but let the other one go? I'm guessing the doors came back because maybe you struck a bargain with him. Okay, fine. Let's do. So it's now. Yeah, I have to give benefit of the doubt with a lot of people and stories and stuff like that, because you have to remember. I forgot what the alert box was on. I apologize. That's popped up a couple of minutes ago. I apologize. You have to remember, not everybody's first language is English, especially when it comes to typing things as well. So if your first language isn't English, then that's a big thing that you don't have to worry about, because quite frankly, a lot of the story was legible. A lot of things made sense. Yeah, a little bit rough grammar here and there, but I wouldn't say it's anything too bad. The premise and there's certain bits of the story that are just a bit It's creative. Creative is a good word for it. Because I like this concept of a creepy bathtub man. It's really bizarre and absurd and goofy, but sometimes horror is goofy, you know? That's okay. I still hate the idea of being a trapped soul forced to bathe with the bathtub shower man forever. I hate that. That sucks. That's horrifying. That counts, right? And he has to spray water you to catch you. I love that. I think it's really funny. I think it's really, really funny. Let me change this. There we go. Yeah. So when it comes to that, your storytelling is it's okay. It is a small story. Not really a bad thing. There are plenty of stories that are short that aren't, that are fine. There's even some short stories that are like really good that are, even just a few sentences long. I mean, one of the most famous ones is oh god, what is it? It's Baby Shoes Never Worn. That's fucking sad, isn't it? It's fucking sad, and it's a horrifying thought, but it's brilliant. So it just proves that length isn't always the defining factor in these things. You have a premise, might be a bit goofy, but there's still a level of horror to it. Maybe not like a super traditional horror, but you've got an entity who traps souls. Nobody really seems to die. It's just like a shitty situation kind of a deal. Yeah. It's something. However, if your first language is English, then my next assumption is going to be that you probably are young. And I'm going to say under the age of 20, which isn't an insult. Don't feel bad about that. It does come across fairly obviously if that is the case. But, if anything, you got the premise of the story here. And it ain't bad. It ain't bad. It's goofy, it's absurd, but it ain't bad. Got to work a little bit on your grammar, but that's the thing I found very common on the internet, especially. Because if people can share their work for free, things are going to be a little rough. And that's okay. I think that's the beauty of it. Because we can all learn and grow and get better together. So I didn't want to super tear this apart because it's not the shittiest thing I've ever read. It's really not. And I'm sure as I continue doing this sort of a series, it will get worse. And I'm kind of excited for that. I'm really excited to see me lose it over a story. Walk out of the room kind of shit. But thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to kind of start this interesting new journey. If there are any terrible stories you'd like me to read, maybe you yourself have a terrible story you'd like me to cover, let me know. Put it in the comments below. You can send me an email, natedognarrates@gmail.com. Let's have a good little fun time with this. Why not? I'm really excited. Call to action. Let's do it. See if we can really grind my gears, huh? Anyway, we will see you guys next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Spreading the word. Hey guys, been off for a long while, and I know a lot of you were worried, but it's okay. Everything makes sense now. I get it. I'm ready to go across. Those dreams I was having about the door with the red light, they finally got me to the end. I got to the door. I opened it. I saw what was on the other side. I was wrong to be afraid. I was stupid to be afraid. But I know that I was just scared to change, to leave this behind. Who wouldn't be? Even the most exciting change is scary. You're not quite sure what's going to happen. Your body's not ready for it. But that's why I'm here. To tell you there's no reason to worry. He's going to take care of you. He's going to take care of all of us. The manacled man. He who waits in the room of cloth. I've already taken the first step across. I see the water turning red as I type this. It won't take long now. It took me a while, but now I see everything for what it was. My initiation. He picked me. He picked Becca too. She's here now, holding my hand as it goes limp. She's helping me across. It couldn't have been anyone but her. It couldn't have been anyone but me. It's been me. always been me. Had to be me. Losing Mom and Dad was preparation for this. Having to teach those entitled brats was training. All the awful things in the world. It's all been training. Learning why none of this is worth it. Realizing why it has to go. It's funny. What he wanted me to do. What I was chosen to do. I've been doing it since the start. Posting the video at the door because I thought I was curious. Because I thought I wanted opinions. I didn't want opinions. I wanted to show you. I wanted to share with you. Now you have it too. You've had it since the start. You've always had it. His blessing, his mark. It's going to be all of us eventually. That's why it doesn't make sense to be scared. It's working through us, getting us ready for the change. The real singularity. What you think is coming, it's nothing. It's fake. But this is true. This is truth. Reality. What's really underneath. What's really on the other side of the door. It's not a door. It's a doorway to the place beyond, the real heaven. Becca's purpose was to guide me there. It was my purpose to guide you. Mom and Dad missed out. I feel bad for them, but I don't envy them. I'm getting to go first. I'm the one making history, helping everyone, uniting everyone. And one day, we'll bring them from wherever they are. He'll bring them from wherever they are. Because he loves us. We're his children. The only ones who have to carry out his legacy, fulfill his mission. I'm going now. For good. I'm glad I was able to share it with you all. Now it's your turn. Your chance to do the work. Spread the word. Maybe you already are. Maybe it works slower in some people and faster in others. Maybe next month you'll feel it. Maybe next week. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe tonight. You'll see him when you close your eyes to go to sleep. You'll walk down the hall to the door. You'll open it. It's not a matter of if, but when. I'll see you there, in the room of cloth. He's waiting there. We're all waiting. Waiting for you. Hi, this is Becca. Prof is with us now. He looks so happy. He has the biggest smile on his face. Let me show you. And that was Spreading the Word by Pretzel Pearson. Now, this is the third part and our conclusion based on the first two that kind of preceded this, which is received a weird DVD from my student who passed away and getting worried. And my student visited me from beyond the grave. She said, I'll see her soon. I'll kind of go ahead and put all three of these together like as a little either playlist or a video or something like that. But the point is, this was a really interesting story, right? How all three parts kind of come together. Basically, you have this tale of madness about obviously what one of the students of this professor in the first part she sadly dies, right? And she sent the professor a bizarre DVD which has kind of like a bit of inky nastiness to it. But you watch the DVD and it's got like this you got this weird imagery about like red water. You've got like weird red wriggling meat and stuff like that. It's really, really bizarre kind of stuff, and you're not entirely sure what exactly is going on. But she kind of like talks to him through dreams, I suppose you could say. And it seems like she's kind of trying to hint that he needs to be the next one to go through this red glowy door, which it could very well easily be a metaphor for something along the lines of like You're progressing through into an afterlife of sorts, perhaps even a pocket dimension of some kind of a horrific creature man, which they got that. The Manacled Man is what they call him, this kind of entity man that, was a very tiny bit of interaction with, really. You don't even really know much about him. He's not really in any of the videos or anything, but clearly he has quite a level of sway of control over the people and the situation. And we understand that he has taken Becca and convinced or converted Becca, perhaps. Perhaps she's under some kind of a brainwashing. We're not entirely sure. Because, yet again, we don't know if they are dead. We don't know if it's just a situation of, like, they've just been mind controlled. Perhaps they're taken to an alternate reality of sorts, perhaps. We're not entirely sure what that situation is. I mean, you would argue that Becca is dead based on the information we got out of the first story, and even somewhat the second story. But I don't remember anything about a body. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, there could have been. If I'm honest with you, I'm just kind of trying to recollect it right now, and I feel like a bit of a doofus. I should have probably reread the story. That would have probably helped. I'm happy to make a fool of myself, though, because then it gives people something to correct me about in the comments, which is good. I'm happy for people to correct me. I don't feel bad about that. I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong. You don't have to be mean about it, but that's okay. Anyway, so we're not sure if death is part of it or if it's even required. All we know is that this manacled man seems to be, I suppose a good way to say it is taking people. He's taking people into whatever realm he lives in. So he can perhaps control them and perhaps get more people over. Maybe he's going to eat them. Maybe he absorbs their life force in some kind of a way. Maybe he takes their souls. We don't know. We don't know exactly what the purpose is. We just understand that bad things are happening, right? And that obviously you don't want to do that. But the other people, the professor and Becca, for example, they're both clearly brainwashed to an extent, or perhaps yet again that they've been taken over, whatever. And they're convincing other people to step through, to follow this path of madness and see where it takes them as well. Obviously, we know where it's going to take him. To a bad time, to the manacled man, to whatever he's going to do with you. So I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it. Not at all. Not at all. But, that doorway is kind of inviting. And, I don't know, maybe we should check it out. Right? Like, they make it sound really safe and really inviting. Who knows? Maybe the truth is in there. Maybe we'll learn everything by going through that doorway. I've been Nate at Night, and I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Pretzel Pearson, for letting me know about this and keeping me up to date. I like the fact there's little shorts that are connected with this, so you get a little bit of videography as well. Really cool. Just adds a little bit more to the story, you know what I mean? I've always enjoyed more elements like pictures, videos, audio. It just builds. It just really kind of immerses you a little bit more in the story. And I think that's great. I think it's been really, really good. I've really been fascinated by the story. And really curious to see what you might come up with next. Let me know what you guys thought down in the comments below. And we'll catch you for whatever is next. Take care. My roommates and I found a key in our junk drawer. We finally discovered what it opens. I wonder how my life would be now if I hadn't let my idle curiosity get the best of me. No therapy, no doctor's bills, no nightmares, no constantly looking over my shoulder, agonizing over the thought that today could be my last. So, if I do disappear, at least I can leave my story behind. Okay, I can do this. You have a junk drawer in your house, right? Usually it's in your kitchen and holds all your miscellaneous items collected over the years. Our drawer contained a pair of dull scissors, 2 koozies from a DWI law firm, a broken screwdriver, and a brass antique key of unknown origin. Based on its size, the key looked like it opened a jewelry box, but I couldn't be sure. It mainly just collected dust in the back corner of the drawer. I glanced at it every time I needed to grab the scissors and wondered where it came from. My buddy Sam and I moved into the house shortly after we finished grad school. It was an older house, but it had a ton of space and a short commute downtown, where Sam and I both worked. We had another roommate named Rocky, who was a bit older than us, but we didn't mind. At the time, I worked in the mayor's office, while Sam worked in finance. Rocky was a line cook at one of the fancier restaurants in town. We all worked long hours, so naturally, we spent a lot of time together. Rocky had a ritual of cooking dinner for us when he returned from a long shift at work, usually drunk, and we became fast friends. He was quite the character, covered in tattoos and kept his hair wrapped up in a red bandana. I remember that he could fix anything and served as our de facto handyman because our ghost of a landlord was too lazy to make repairs. I assumed the key belonged to Rocky. After all, he liked to collect things, and the house was covered in baubles and trinkets he'd picked up over the years. My favorite being a life-size poster of Jackie Brown in our living room. I asked him about the key one day after a couple of beers, but he had no idea where it came from. The key had been in that drawer ever since he moved in around 10 years ago. Rocky figured it was his old roommate's key and left it alone since the two didn't get along. So that was the end of that. We settled further into our lives for a bit until a rainstorm nearly tore the roof off. Naturally, our landlord went missing, so Rocky had to patch the leak in the attic. I'll never forget that day. Rocky trotted downstairs, soaking wet and covered in dirt, headlamp still lit. "Fellas, I think I found something," he said while grinning. Inside his hands, he held a lockbox. The box was metal, maybe iron, and almost totally rusted. The three of us stared quietly at it, wondering whether we should use the key. "Fuck it, why not?" Sam said, grabbing the key from the drawer. It was a perfect fit, and the eroded lock fell to the ground with a thud. Rocky carefully lifted the top open and turned his headlamp on. "What the fuck?" he whispered. Inside, we found an old composition notebook filled page by page with odd symbols, a military-style compass, a map of Texas, and a faded Polaroid of a young woman with blonde hair smiling at what looked to be a birthday party. The back of the Polaroid listed the coordinates 30.565882, negative 95.569881. "Huh," Sam said while looking at his phone. "It looks like these coordinates are in the Sam Houston National Forest. Not too far away at all." "We should go!" Rocky yelled. "You two have always talked about taking me camping." It was true. Sam and I were astonished that Rocky, a man of many talents and adventures, had never been camping. We teased him often about it since Sam and I met in the Scouts when we were kids and were well accustomed to the outdoors. Now seemed as good a time as any. "Who knows how many people have lived in this house?" Rocky pondered. "Maybe we'll find something worth keeping." I dream about that day often. I'm locked to a chair and watching the three of us rummage through that box, and I'm pleading, no, screaming, for Rocky to throw it away. I can feel my screams turn into laughter in a voice I don't recognize. We set off a few days later, listening to John Denver and Willie Nelson along the way, while Sam twiddled with his new sat-nav device. The three of us parked our car at base camp and prepared for the 3-mile trek into the unknown, following the trails before the sat-nav incessantly beeped for us to go off the beaten path. We sidestepped broken branches and poison ivy before passing through a wooden archway into another forest clearing. "Your destination is 500 meters north," the sat-nav droned. "Ah, fucking finally," Rocky muttered. "You would have made a terrible scout," Sam teased. Rocky was about to retort, but something made him stop in his tracks. In front of us lay a path sandwiched by 2 rows of trees. Cloths, tattered t-shirts, and dirty towels hung from the branches. Some looked like they were tied, recently, while others were nearly rotted away. I'd never seen anything like it. "Your destination is in 250 feet. The sat-nav hummed again as we marched forward, gazing at all the trees. At the end of the pathway lay a decaying stone well, covered in moss. "Arrived! Arrived! Arrived!" The sat-nav yelled at us before going quiet. "Jesus, wonder how far down it goes," Sam asked. I picked up a rock and threw it down the well, and was almost immediately greeted by a thud. "Looks like someone plugged it a while ago," Sam said. Before Sam could finish his next sentence, Rocky had already plunged into the well. "What the fuck, Rocky?" we both yelled as he disappeared into darkness without a sound. A couple of seconds of silence followed before we saw a flash of Rocky's headlamp. "Hey guys, grab the rope! I found something!" We pulled Rocky out of the well and cursed at him while he brushed the dirt off. He rolled his eyes and pulled out something from the back of his pants. It was an old wooden box, made to look like a small coffin. Someone engraved the same weird symbols from the composition notebook on its top. They'd crudely nailed the coffin shut, and several rusty nails protruded from the bottom. Creepy, Sam noted. I know what you're thinking. Are we idiots? Are we blind to the color red? Perhaps so. But back then, I didn't believe in the unknown and only accepted what I knew for certain. Now, I could only be certain of my inevitable demise. Rocky cracked open the coffin with his crowbar. It immediately splintered, and a brown mass fell into the ground. It looked like a primitive doll made out of hard brown clay, with holes for eyes and an agonizing frown on its face. Several faded blonde tufts of hair jutted out of the doll's head. It was then that I felt something off was going on. I felt an inexplicable sensation that someone was watching us. I darted my eyes around, but saw nothing. Instead, noticing that the cicadas had stopped humming. It was deathly quiet, barring a weird clicking sound. Guys, I think we should put that back, I said. Well, fellas, Rocky said, remind me never to go into the attic again. He then launched the doll into the sky. That's not going in the living room, Sam laughed. Well, at least we found something. Come on, let's get out of here and set up camp. We left the clearing and set up at the designated sites. Rocky regaled us with tales from his youth as we drank liquor by the campfire with a woman named Bonnie, whom we met on the trails and was camping with her dog. I had a great time, but as I went to sleep, I couldn't escape the feeling that we weren't alone. The next morning, we awoke hungover and drove back home, satisfied with our adventure. I think that redhead liked me. I should have given her my number, Rocky muttered while trying not to hurl. Things soon went back to normal, until one day we received a letter in the mail. Huh, Sam said. Looks like our landlord died. I don't think I ever met her. Yeah, she was like in a coma or something when I moved in, Rocky stated while digging through his backpack. Hey, has anyone seen my bandana? She was in a coma when you moved in? I asked. Yeah, something like that. Definitely bedridden. That's why we send our rent check to the LLC. Huh. Always wondered, Sam started. Wait, it says here she died in a fall. How can someone in a coma die from a fall? Why would they even tell us how she died? Fuck, I think I left my bandana at the campsite. How am I supposed to go to work? Yeah, I think I left my hat there, Sam said. I have to stop mixing liquors. Rocky threw up his hands in frustration and left for work. It was the last time we saw him alive. I don't know the exact details, but the story is that Rocky stuck his hand in a pot of boiling water and nearly cooked his hand off. We heard from another line cook that Rocky didn't say a word until someone finally noticed what he'd done. It took 4 guys to pull his hand out of the pot, and only then did Rocky scream. We rushed to the hospital, but Rocky had already died by the time we arrived. Doctors said they had him stabilized and were preparing him for surgery before he flatlined. We notified his family and attended his small funeral service in Long Island. Sam and I returned to the house and decided to break our lease. We hired movers to send Rocky's stuff back to his hometown and made plans to move into a new spot. That's when things started getting weirder. We received no communications from the LLC that managed the house, but someone had definitely been in the house while we were gone. Someone moved subtly, and the whole house seemed cleaner. We chalked it up to inspectors preparing the house for viewings, but it felt weird that someone was snooping around while we were gone. I noticed my reading glasses were also missing. The house also felt warm all the time. It was summertime in Texas, so it became almost unbearable to be in the house without the AC on. The thermostat always stayed low, so we figured it was a problem with the HVAC. We knew that new repairs were never going to happen, so we decided to brave it until our new place was ready. 2 weeks was no problem. But soon, we wondered if that was possible. Sam woke up one morning, sore and covered in bruises, while the top of my head felt like someone had yanked some hair out of it. Every night started to feel the same. I would try to go to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in our house, poking around even though the nights were deathly silent. Sam finally gave up and told me he was going to spend the rest of the week at his girlfriend's. I was welcome to come and sleep on the couch. I told Sam to go ahead and that I would meet him the following night as I needed to pack a bag. Adios, muchacho, Sam said on the way out and closed the door behind him. The next time I saw him was in a funeral casket. Car accident. Sam was on his way to his girlfriend Allie's house when his car veered into a telephone pole at over 90 miles per hour. He died on impact. Nearly every bone was broken in his body. I consoled Allie, who felt responsible. She read the autopsy report and noticed that while both arms were almost shattered, Sam's left arm appeared to have broken prior to the crash based on impact. She couldn't get over it and asked if Sam had injured himself earlier that week. I couldn't provide any answers. He was covered in bruises, but I would have noticed if he'd broken his arm. After grieving the loss of my two friends, I finally left the house and moved into an apartment across town, falling into a pattern of unhealthy coping mechanisms. One day, I received a package in the mail. The package had no return address. I carefully opened it and was horrified to discover it was the same box from the attic that the original key taped to the front. My stomach churned as I opened the box. It was full of Polaroids. The first Polaroid shows the three of us surrounding the well in the forest. Rocky's back is to the camera, but I can tell that he's holding the small coffin we found. The second Polaroid shows Rocky in his sleeping bag by the camp with his red bandana off. The next three Polaroids displayed dolls similar to the one we found, except these clearly depicted us. One wore Rocky's bandana, another sported Sam's Chicago Cubs hat, which looked shrunken, and the final one, which appeared to be mine, had jet black hair and seemed made from a different material. All three dolls were photographed in the attic. 3 more Polaroids showed what happened to the dolls. Someone set Rocky's doll on fire and twisted Sam's into oblong shapes. They photographed my doll at a different location, resting on a rock in the woods, with a large black crow creeping in the background. I sent the package to the police, who promptly said they would get back to me as they were still investigating Rocky's death. That was 3 months ago. The assigned detective now sends all my calls to voicemail. I've been in therapy ever since the mayor's office demanded I go or lose my job. I've been a distraction at work recently, and it probably has to do with my appearance. My skin has been slowly falling off. It started a week after I received the package. I noticed small sores on my legs and feet and immediately went to a doctor, who not only could not identify what caused the sores, but denied they even existed. I refused the referral to a psychiatrist and went to get a second opinion, but they all told me the same thing. Meanwhile, the sores grew larger until the flesh literally dripped off my arms and legs. I received more Polaroids of my doll, taken in the same space, but at different times. It appeared to be slowly decaying, starting with the legs and then slowly moving up to its face. In each photo, more crows huddled around the doll. Therapy hasn't helped. My psychiatrist diagnosed me with walking corpse syndrome, rooted in PTSD. Treatment isn't improving, and I'm worried my doctor will institutionalize me. Hopefully, I'll be gone before then. Then they'll see. They'll all see. So I'm here, glued to my screen, as I feel my left eyeball brush against my cheek, typing my story with nothing but bones and spitting out the bile congealed in my throat to warn all of you. The scariest thing you can find isn't a stalker in the woods, a night with no moon, or a monster under your bed. It's a key in the junk drawer. And that was My Roommates and I Found a Key in Our Junk Drawer. We finally discovered what it opens, by Rahayahim. Rahayahim? It's a cool name either way. Cool name. So, I like this story. I like this story a lot because there's nothing too crazy going on, besides the fact that voodoo dolls are clearly in play. Now, for those of you who don't quite understand what voodoo dolls are, to put it simply, they're these little dolls that are meant to depict a person. Not entirely, just like fairly straightforward, usually made of like straw, kind of bound up together and things like that, string, what have you. And usually to bind it to a person, you have to have something of theirs. Like, so in which case they had the hair for the guy, they had the lock of hair for what I'm assuming was the landlord of the house, based on what we're going to talk about later. And then obviously like the bandana for another one, etc., etc. And then obviously whatever happens to the voodoo doll then happens to the person. That's the whole logic behind how that works. Which, whether or not it's true or not, whether that can actually happen, I don't know. But voodoo dolls are a real thing. They are a real thing, obviously steeped in voodoo. Anyway, we're getting a little sidetracked. So that's just a brief description of that. This story is really good because, yet again, it's not too crazy. There's nothing too insane going on, except for the fact that voodoo dolls are in play, which is interesting. It's really nice to see that that's kind of the problem with the story. We've had a different story that did involve a voodoo doll as well, which was used by a witch. This was the working in like a coffee shop in the afterlife kind of a thing. Very interesting. So it's exciting to see them be used a little bit more. It's not very common to see in stories, because yet again, there's a lot you can do with it, but it's just not super terrifying to everybody. And I get that. I totally get that. It's not a monster. It's not some crazy entity that stalks you forever or something, undefeatable, whatever. It's a doll, right? What I found interesting though, right? Because when they first find the voodoo doll and the coffin and everything out in the well in the woods, they find the one with I think it's like a blonde lock of hair. And I didn't realize this upon first reading the story, but while I've been editing and putting it together now, I realized that that when he threw the first voodoo doll, really random, don't know why you would just decide to do that, I suppose funny, haha. But then they find out that their landlord has a fall. Now you see where I'm going with this? See where I'm going? Especially because they're like, oh, she was in a coma, how could she have fallen? Exactly. But because they threw that voodoo doll, which clearly, apparently, is connected to her, we don't know why. I don't know why this specific household is the ones being targeted for, this voodoo. I don't know why. We don't know any of that. Maybe it started with just the landlord lady, and somehow it's carried on to them, because it's not like voodoo dolls just come out of nowhere. Somebody has to make them. So somebody is doing all of this to them. We obviously don't know who. But yet again, if they're able to take Polaroid pictures of them, and they weren't aware of this, that's strange. The fact they were able to take a picture of them while they were all at the coffin, so they're all awake. It's obvious when somebody takes a picture of you, because especially with a Polaroid, it makes a noise. So, strange. Very strange. You know what I mean? Is this an invisible entity or person? I don't know. That's Mr. Milo, if you can hear him. He's a good cat. Very good, friendly boy. But he's not allowed to be with the other cats. They don't get along. But he's very sweet to people. Anyway, I like this. I thought the story was quite good. I also found it interesting how, obviously, so Rocky's caught on fire. He burns himself in the pot and everything like that. And then the other roommate had the crash. And now our protagonist, he's got his voodoo doll is just being attacked by crows slowly over time, which is causing him to go through walking corpse syndrome and all that. And it's just like incredibly sad and depressing, the fact that he's slowly being pecked apart by crows, which obviously aren't real crows, because they're attacking his voodoo doll form, not him. But he still feels the effects of what's happening to voodoo doll. It's just, that's a horrifying thought, isn't it? Knowing that you're always going to be, plus it makes you wonder, right? It makes you wonder, will he go find it? Because he's being sent a Polaroid. He's being sent multiple Polaroids. I mean, I suppose it's hard to tell where it is. It might not be in the same forest, for example. It might not be in the same area where they found the first voodoo doll. So that totally makes sense. It would be difficult to find when the picture's only of a voodoo doll on a rock. Yeah, completely understandable. Very difficult. It's a good story, though. I really, really enjoyed this. I'm really glad I got to read it and share it with all of you. Well, this has been Nate at Night, and I've had a wonderful time, and I sure hope you have too. Let me know what you want me to cover next. I might even start covering some mysteries, like some unsolved mystery kind of stuff. I think that'd be quite fun. Just obviously talking about them, maybe discussing theories and things like that. I think that'd be good. I've been thinking about this. I've been told to look into like mass disappearance events and stuff like that. I think that'd be quite cool to cover as well. Just because, as much as I love reading stories, it'd be nice to kind of do other things as well. Just change it up a little bit, but still in kind of the vein of mysteries, horror, etc., etc. You know what I mean? I'm sure true crime will inevitably become a thing for me. Maybe we'll cover it, but I feel like a lot of people already cover that, so I don't really want to cover super criminal kind of cases. I want to cover more of the mysterious side of things, but I'm open to suggestions. If you would like me to do true crime stuff as well, I'm happy to delve that way. Just curious what your opinions are. Sorry, I keep shaking the table. I'm one of those people who likes to always move a body part. Can't help it. Just a thing. Some of you will know exactly what I'm talking about, where you like bounce your leg or something. Yeah. I'm the same. Can't help it. Anyway, we will see you next time. Take care, peeps. Thank you so much to my YouTube members and Patreon members for all the love and support. It's thanks to people like you that we can keep growing.